galim Crowder'io paklausyti, jaučiu.
And so I see that.
You just said male.
Uh-huh.
That's sex. That's not gender.
Oh, sorry. Whatever is the gender
No, you
term.
can't keep it straight, can you?
I mean, it's I will
Because
listen.
it's silly. It's a little silly, isn't
No.
it?
Ta prasme, atsidarom pirmas 2 sekundžių video ir jau tokia, loginė, nežinau. Vien tai, kad jis negali keep it straight, nereiškia, kad silly. Tai gali reikšti, kad yra nauja ir reikia priprasti. Vien... Jo, aš suprantu, čia kontekstą pamatysim, tipo, kad tas pats žmogus nesugebėjo tenais, kaip čia, pagal tas taisyklės kalbėti ir vadinti, kas seks, kas gender. Bet Stevenas Crowder'is maždaug gači momentas ir tiesiog galima susipainioti ir maišyti naujus dalykus, netgi jeigu jie protingi ir nebuki, bet anyway. Čia bus jau
It's time for another installment of Change My Mind, the series where we rationalize our positions on controversial topics. Now, today's subject is a hot one in the news lately.
True.
Biological males in women's sports.
A Victoria woman who won a world championship in
Tai aš savo poziciją gal pasakysiu prieš žiūrint tą video. Kai kalbėjau apie tą temą ir pirmai pradėjau domėtis tą temą kažkiek, tai čia buvo gal 3 metai atgal, dabar jau 2 metai atgal, nežinau, jau kuris laikas praėjo. Tai buvau nuomonės tos, kad, what the fuck, ne, absurdas, ką. Per tą laiką, bet dar duomenų aišku mažai buvo išėję apie tai, anyway. Per tą laiką lygtais olimpinėse jo leido dalyvauti, tada dar kažkur ten leido dalyvauti, kai kur neleido, daug visokių tokių vyko ir išėjo keletas tyrimų papildomų, kur realiai, abi pusės realiai naudoja. Vieni naudoja vieną tarsi, čia įrodo, kad nėra, ten tyrimai išėjo, ar tų žmonių, kurie pradeda naudoti hormonų pakeitimo terapiją, ar lieka ta jėga raumenys jų organizme, tarkim, ar išlieka tas competitive edges. Ir dabar, kiek suprantu, pagrinde visos tos didžiosios studies, kur išeina, rodo, kad lieka, netgi ten keletas 4 metai, ten 5 metai po to, ir ten labai dar, bet jo, dar iki galo be nieks nieko nepasako, bet dabar kaip atrodo, tai tipo yra tikrai pranašumas išliekantis ir ten tik labai nišinėse erdvėse, kur ten tipo gal ne fizinis sportas ir panašiai, ten gal tada tipo fine, bet for the most part dabar tipo sako, kad jo išlieka pranašumas ir nereiktų leisti tipo, bet todėl dabar yra labai contested ir ginčijamasi dėl šito, nes kita pusė ginčias, kad vos pranašumas išlieka ir tada tipo... Toks vienas argumentas, ką aš girdėjau ir Desnį ginčiantis, ir kiti ten youtuberiai, tie, kur twitcheriai ginčiasi, kur tipo... Pranašumas yra tipo antiek mažas, kad pohui maždaug. Tada kiti sako, gerai, bet tai mes, tai ką mes čia dabar uždrausim trans, tai dabar uždrauskim ir super aukštiems žmonėm, nes tai yra kažkokia freak accident genetiškai, tipo, genetinis, ir jie turi pranašumą irgi, ką jiem uždrausti, tai normalizuoti visus tada, ką reikia pagal ūgį, pagal svorį, pagal visiškai viską. Jo, ir vienas dalykas, ką kažkaip praleidžia, ir nemačiau, kad kažkas, kolautintų tą argumentą. Gerai, mes kalbam, vieni žmonės natūraliai kažkokį geną turi, o kiti geria vaistus, ar ten hormonus, ar dar kažką, kad tą pakeistų. Tai, tipo, nelabai sulyginami dalykai. Žodžiu. Tai jo, tai kaip gaunas, tai jo, pozicija tokia, kad greičiausiai dabar, kiek duomenų yra išėję, vis dar jie suportina ir palaiko tą poziciją, kad nereiktų leisti, nes galų gale jo, tai nėra sąžininga, tiesiog nėra sąžininga ir jeigu kažkaip reikia turbūt kažkaip spręsti tą problemą, jeigu reikia, žinau, kiek ten skaičių yra ir panašiai, bet jeigu jau spręsti tą problemą, tai kažkaip kitaip reikia, o ne padarant, tipo, kaip čia, naikinant moterų tą sporto sceną, I guess. Reiktų safe space for biological women, bet negalima skriausti ir trans. Tipo, jo, tipo, čia tipo moterų sporto kaina tai būtų. tai turbūt nėra geriausias sprendimas. Reikia kažkokius kitus sprendimus ieškoti. Kaip ir sprendimai buvo ten su tualetais, kai buvo tas klausimas prieš 100 metų ten, ar į tuos eiti, gal tiesiog neutralius padaryti, dar kažką, tai vat išsprendė, kažkaip išsprendė kažkiek ten skirtingai visur. Tai su sportu turbūt kažkaip reikia spręsti, bet turbūt nėra geriausias variantas, tiesiog reikia su moterim dalyvauti, nes ten yra jų atvejų tenais ir tai daužo moteris vienam sporte, tai ten tuos pasiekimus įma kitam sporte ir tipo neaišku ir tyrimai, kaip sakau, daromi lygtais, kad reikia kažkaip kitaip tą problemą spręsti. Bent jau taip dabar sakytų. Anyway, žiūrim tą video.
Cycling has been hit with a wave of backlash because she is transgender.
New Zealand has chosen the first transgender athlete to compete at its Olympic Games. It's also reignited a debate with critics who say it's unfair.
Transgender swimmer Leah Thomas breaking barriers and records. Sports Illustrated calls the college senior the most controversial athlete in America.
The beauty of Change My Mind is that almost invariably, productive dialogue takes place, and people generally leave feeling better than they came, which is exactly what happened here. But not everyone from the tolerant activist left was so happy about, conversation.
What's the message of radical trans liberation now? What does it mean?
I'm not here to talk to you, Steven.
No? No one? Radical trans liberation now? Look! I'm slightly chocolatey!
This one's still a mystery to me. We're still trying to identify the gender. Is it male, female, Z-male, trigender? Either way, I was greatly...
Tipo, man atrodo, Stevenas Crowderis biški retardas. Taip, net ne biški. Aiškiai, aš nežinau, ar jis pats tiki to, ką sako. Biški bailys, toks, veikėjas, ne ką. Bet, kai tu mėtai daiktus, klyki, rėki, tu viskas daunasis. Tu esi antiek šiukšlė mano akyse, kad, tipo, jaiks tiesiog. Bet čia, vaikai, tipo, kiek tai jiems 18-19 metų, mažai kas suvokia, ką daro, mažai kas suvokia, kas yra ta pati žodžio laisvė ir kaip už save stovėti reikia. Tai ten labai nesureikšmint, tiesiog išauks iš to, bet biškis setka tokia kultūra yra vis tiek. Vietoj to, kad eiti ir kalbėti ir tada įrodyti Stevenui Crowderiui, kai jisai klysta, nes, laimėti prieš jį, kad ir tipo, bet, su plakacija ateiti ir aš ne tam, kad šnekėti, tai kam tu čia esi tada? Kokią tu poziciją atėjo su užrašu ir sako, aš čia ne tam atėjau, kad šnekėti. Tai kam atėjai, seni? Parodyti, kad už kažką stovi, už ką negali apginti, negali pastovėti už savo įsitikinimus, už savo nuomonę. Tipo čia sponsorio lygio, tai tik mano nuomonė, atstokit nuo manęs lygio žmonės. Yra kaip yra, bet tiesiog čia yra stupid ass shit. Jeigu negali savo nuomonės apginti žodžiais, neturi teisės turėti tada nuomonę iš viso, aš tą sakiau ir sakysiu toliau.
Inconvenienced. If you figure it out, comment below. The point is, some people just don't know how to use their words. Unlike this person, Isaac, with whom I had a conversation that was a little more productive.
Isaac, Steven, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So, Isaac, I don't know. I know you said you've watched the show.
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know how familiar you are kind of with this, but the idea is that we, sit down with people, hopefully where it's a rational discussion on what are sort of controversial topics. And often people have rational discussions, on topics that are, okay, it's easy to have a rational discussion, or it's easy to rationalize your position. The second it gets into something that may be emotionally charged, we throw it out the window. Yeah. So that's what it is in the bottom line. Today's topic, I do not believe that biological males should be allowed to compete in women's sports. Obviously, you disagree to some degree.
Yes.
Feel free to make your case and change my mind.
Okay. I guess my first point of contention would be with the wording of the statement.
Okay.
Biological males should not compete. I'm curious as to why it would be biological males and not trans women. should not compete, because I feel like there is a distinction there, even if it is, maybe an arbitrary one in your case.
Well, how is it not arbitrary?
How is it not? Oh, you mean the distinction between trans? Yeah.
So when you say that, for example, I could use either term interchangeably.
Yeah.
Biological males is something that everyone would understand.
Yeah.
So why is it so important to you that terminology be changed?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the times people use like biology as a sort of like constant, obviously I'm sure you believe, maybe I'm wrong, that like biology it's a binary and that there's male and female and that it's...
Gerai, visų pirma, biology naudoja as a binary, nes tai mokslas, tai tikslusis mokslas, ne? But anyway.
It's just like that, is that correct? And that you can be one or the other, and that there's no...
Well, there are obviously radical exceptions to the rule, like intersex people or people with androgen resistance or stuff. We're talking about 0.01% of the population. So yes, obviously, and obviously even people who believe in the transgender ideology have long agreed that biology exists in a binary.
Oh, for sure.
And not gender, but biology.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Okay. So if we agree that biological sex is, or at least, would you agree with my presumption here that certainly what's being taught on school is that gender and sex are different, and the primary difference is sex is biological and gender is societal?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, all right. So sorry, continue with your point as to why you would prefer it be worded
Kokia Lietuvoje terminologija, by the way, gender ir sex? Tai kaip suprantu, sex pas mus būtų lytis, ta biologinė. O kažkaip jie vadino tą gender Lietuvoje buvo, prisimenu, socialinė lytis? Atrodo, tai buvo išvertę. Atrodo, lygtais tokį naudoja, socialinė lytis. Tai labai taip tiesiogiai pažodžiu, jeigu esi ir išvertę socialinė, okay.
Trans women versus biological males.
Because I do believe that as far as expression goes, like obviously there is that difference that you're talking about. And even in trans women, a lot of them who do compete in sports, there is obviously the hormonal, like, estrogen and like all the like treatment that they go through, which does alter their physical sort of like ability to compete in these sports. And so to say biological men instead of trans women sort of indicates that there is no difference when...
Ta prasme, aš vis tiek nesuprantu, kodėl jis prisikabino prie to. Tai tas pats realiai, ne? Tu tą patį žmogų gali ir taip vadinti. Aišku, Simonas Crowderis pasirinko tą pusę, kur, šališka vis tiek į jo pusę bus, bet, techniškai tu gali ir taip vadinti.
When I think there probably is,
actually,
if minor...
I would argue, maybe I'm misunderstanding your point, because you just said that gender is societal.
Yeah.
Sex is biological.
Yeah.
So the reason that I am saying is biological males is because this is biological, right?
Yeah.
Males.
Yeah.
But then you're saying you would rather see trans women, which is societal. It's not biological. Sports are separated by biology.
Okay.
That's why there are male-female divisions.
Yes.
And up until recently, male-female divisions, men's and women's divisions, they were always separated by biology. And you're suggesting that it would be more conducive to an accurate assessment here by using a gendered term rather than biological.
Okay, I see your point now, yes. So I would concede to you on that as far as like the distinction. I'm fine with the wording if that is sort of your,
Well, I want to understand your position because you just said that gender and sex are different.
Yes.
And my issue is with, I don't care if someone wants to identify.
Yeah.
Right? If they want to identify as a woman in society, that's a totally separate issue. We're talking about sports which have been separated by biological sex.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
We're talking about biological males who are now dominating biological females.
Okay.
So my point of contention with what you just said there would be that biological males are dominating biological females. I have not seen that play out. Obviously, there's a few cases here and there.
Dalykas yra tas, kad tas argumentas, nėra geras argumentas. Tai, kad dabar aš to dar nemačiau, nes dabar yra gal 2 ar 3 trans atvejai iš viso, kur dalyvauja to moterų sporte. Bet jau net jie kai kurie parodė, kad tipo, rekordus breikina ir panašiai. Tai mintis turbūt yra ta kritikų, kad jeigu tu tiesiog leidi atvirai, be jokių ten limitų viską, tu labai encouraginsi tą ir daugiau atsiras. Ir kad jis sakytų, kad tai yra geras dalykas, bet realiai baiminasi, kad būtent tada ir pasimatys rezultatų daugiau. Jeigu, nes dabar jų tiek mažai dalyvauja, bet ir tai jau sugeba rezultatų pasiekti. Tai vien skaičių žaidimas. Bet vėlgi, čia net neturėtų būti turbūt argumentas. Argumentas turėtų būti ar sąžininga. O tam, kad išsiaiškinti ar sąžininga, moterų atžvilgių būtų, tai tam tos tyrimus ir daro, ir išlieka pranašumas ir panašiai. Nes net nesvarbu, net jeigu jos neužimtų pirmų vietų, net jeigu tos trans moteris neužimtų pirmų vietų, jeigu jos užimtų, pavyzdžiui, 5 vietą, bet jos turėjo pranašumą nesąžiningą, tai jau būtų nesąžiningai. Ir tas jau būtų blogai. Nereikia būtinai gal pirmos vietos užimti, mes čia turbūt pati mintis, kad tai nėra sąžiningas competition. Mes draudžiam dopingus visokius, nes jie padaro tą varžybas nesąžiningas. Tipo visose sportuose ten, antidopingo testai, viskas, kad būtų sąžiningai galėtų varžytis. Ir jo, kai kurie natūraliai turės pranašumą. Ten tas jaumingas, kur labai aukštas, ten kiniečio krepšininkas, kur ten dažnai pavyzdį panaudoja jį. Jisai turi labai aukštą ūgį, tipo, ir genetinę loteriją tokią laimėjo ir jisai turi pranašumą tą. Bet tai nėra vaistas, kurį geri, tai nėra steroidas, kurį imi, tiesiog, ten lygtais Etiopijos kažkokie ten huiznė, nežinau, čia aš sukūriau tik ką, kažkokia ten tauta, ar juodaodžiai apskritai, turi on average plaučių talpą didesnę, ar kažkas tokio, ar kai kurie turi, kai kurie gal žmonės, bet labiau ten statistiškai, nežinau, bet žodžiu, tie, kur mina dviračius, jiem labai svarbu yra plaučių kažkaip ten tūris ar talpa, kad galėtų daug deguonės prafiltruoti. Žodžiu, ten kažkokie techniniai dalykai, kažkokią dokumentiką žiūrėjau, bet jau viską pamiršau. Bet esmė yra ta, kad tie, kurie neturi to, realiai, tam testai yra galima pasidaryti, tai sako, tu niekad nebūsi topė dviračių minime. Tiesiog, fucking neįmanoma tau bus konkuruoti. Galima sakyti, čia yra unfair advantage'as, bet tai yra natūralus toksai tiesiog. Tu negeri vaistų, tu nieko nedarai savo organizmui ten ir panašiai. Tai turbūt, mes kaip dabar visuomenė tą sportą tipo filtruoja, aš net ten lapšiai einu, tą sportą, reguliuoja, tai I guess, kad nenaudoti jokių substance, kurie nėra tie, quote unquote, natūralūs. O jau kai tu pradedi keisti organizmą su tais hormonų terapijom ir panašiai, tai čia prilygina, kad vos steroidus naudoji, žinai, ir gauni pranašumą prieš moteris, kurios nenaudoja, nieko to nedaro. Tai jo. Žiūrim toliau.
But I could easily just make the argument that Leah Thomas came in 8th in one of her races and came in 5th in another one. And so
tai vis tiek turėjo pranašumą nesąžiningai.
And set the record with a time that would have ranked not even in the top 500.
Yeah.
Right, not even the top 500 male rankings for the 500 meter, not even the top 800 for the 200 meter, which I believe is what Leah Thomas won.
You're saying the record he set when he was racing women...
The record that he set as a race with women,
would not even register...
Rank in the top 500 with
and
men.
How does that further your point?
Well, the point is this is someone who was competing as a male, was a middling to low end of the pack male, and is now a champion female.
My argument to that would just be that the reason why he was middle of the pack was because he was on hormones. And because he had begun to transition while he was competing against men, as far as I was aware.
No, and if you would argue that, it would certainly only be at the tail end, not for the entirety of his athletic career.
No, not for the entirety.
Right.
But when you're looking at those middle of the pack numbers, I believe, and obviously it's just your word against my word, so I'm not gonna like stay on this point.
No, and I appreciate it. And I try and make all the references publicly available, so when this goes up, because I can just easily get something wrong. For example, I could be mixing up the 200 and 500 meter.
Right.
Yeah. I know that he won one of them.
And it's kind
and
of,
then
you're missing the forest for the trees if
right.
you want to get caught up in
Yeah,
that,
exactly,
so.
because there are many, many examples of biological males dominating biological females. You know, there are over 80 examples of women who either lost out on opportunities or scholarships. You have Mary Gregory, I believe, in powerlifting. You have women cycling, a record that was set. You have examples across the board in weightlifting, in cycling, in swimming, in track.
Na, aš nežinau jau tiek pavyzdžių, bet jaučiu tikrai yra, nes...
Women can actually be physically...
Aš nežiūrėjau visų tų pavyzdžių, tikrai nesekiau, bet, nu, assume jau, jeigu jų ir yra, tai Stevenas Crowderis bus radęs visiškai visus iki vieno.
harmed. So it has happened quite a bit. Now, granted, it's such a small percentage of the population. Sure. What I want to avoid is, and I mean this genuinely, I'm not just blowing smoke, you seem like a sharp guy, you know, that intellectual fallacy of appeal to novelty. Right, that argumentum ad novitatem is what they'll call it, but appeal to novelty, which means, well, since we haven't done it yet, therefore there are no consequences. Well, it's just because we haven't done it yet. This is very, very new, and where we have implemented these types of policies, we've seen an unbelievable differential between the biological males and women. Okay. It's just we've only been doing this for a few years. It's like saying, well, there are no negative consequences to a 90% income tax yet. Sure. But if we implement it tomorrow and it takes 5 years to see all the bankruptcies, it's not really an argument. So where we have implemented it, we have seen quite a few.
Tipo, va čia tas dalykas, atėjo žmogus studentas, kuris, nu, legit neskiria ne 10 minučių pagalvoti apie savo paties argumentus, tipo. Nes jeigu jis pagalvotų pats apie savo paties argumentus, nu, jis pats turėtų tiesiog juos iškart pamatyti, vat, kad čia nėra geri argumentai. Tai, kad tu vat sakai, kad, nu, vat, mes nematom rezultatų. Nu, gerai, kodėl paklausi savęs ir 2 minutės praeina. Ir tai tu šito jau niekada nebesakytum, nu, kaip argumento už. Nes tai nėra geras argumentas, nu, jis subyra, vat, iš karto. Ir ką dabar, va, Stevenas Crowderis jau kiek čia? 10, nu, 9 kiek čia minutės, tipo, kiek čia kalba. Ai, nu, mažiau, nes ten buvo intro. Tai realiai patį praščiausią argumentą, kokį galima turbūt sukurti trans, nu, už trans sporte. Man todėl patinka tos visai debatus, kurių dabar nebus, nes Destiny užbanino tiesiog. Ten buvo labai įvairių argumentų, tokių, kur tikrai yra sunku, nu, tokie, kur neaiškus atsakymai patampa, kur prieini, kur atrodo, okei, o tai kaip čia dabar tą atsakyti tada atsakymą ir kaip surasti atsakymą, nes jo, šį čia dabar ką tas studentas, tai matos, kai jis apšiai nieko negalvojęs apie tai, ten nieko daug nemastęs, nes pats silpniausią argumentą atnešė iš trans pusės. Nu, aišku, jo, pats Crowderis turbūt nesugebėtų prieš tos transaktyvistus apsiginti, kai jie, bet, nu, esmė ta, kad tai nėra labai apginama pozicija, nes duomenys ir mokslas yra, nu, Crowderio pusė, kaip ir dabar, duomenys taip išėję. Aš nežinau, aš nemačiau dar realiai labai gerų argumentų už, visiems trūksta kažko, po visiems trūksta arba tiesiog mokslinio rėmimo, arba logikos. Grįžai, ne? Okay.
But it is on a smaller scale because it would have been considered absurd 5 years ago.
And it's hard for me to contextualize that 80 number that you gave because I do not know what the total is. So it's like it's a hard number rather than a percentage. So it's hard for me to take that at face value.
Well, even then, let's say it's not that much. Yeah. Okay, it's still more than 1.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we can get to my issues. You know, for example, you mentioned hormones. So I want to make sure that I understand this because I think you're actually arguing what a lot of people argue, and I can understand why people would think this way. Yeah. That if a biological male undergoes hormone replacement, that they no longer would have the biological advantages inferred.
I'm not necessarily saying that. Obviously, that is the majority, but it's obviously not in every case.
Man atrodo, čia Crowderis lydina į spastus, nes man atrodo, jis yra paskaitęs keletą tų straipsnių, tai nu, tų tyrimų, kur priešingai sako, ir tipo bando įlydinti tą poziciją, kurį jis paskui paneigs su straipsniu išėjusiu, nes jis tai, ką daro, tai studentai, kurie neskaitė jokio artiklo ir jokio to darbo tipo, pasimaunant to, gal ne, nežinau.
So, if someone did not undergo hormone replacement therapy at all, you would be against them competing against women?
I actually don't know. It's a very nuanced situation. Oh, just because like as far as like
because you brought that up as one of the first things.
Yes, just in the case of like like these people are just dominating and whatever, and in the case of like Leah Thomas competing against men. It was more so just to say that like he was competing against men while he was on hormones. But my greater sort of, because you do bring up a good
Aš anksčiau galvojau, kad esu kietas diskutuotojas, bet net nepastebėdavau, kad aš tiesiog lydindavau į tas pusės, kurias suprantu. Ką turiu menį? Ką reiškia, kad aš tiesiog lydindavau į tas pusės, kurias suprantu? Visų pirma, niekas mes nesam geri diskutuotojai, nes diskusija ten turi ir taisyklės savo ir viską vis tiek mes niekas to neužsiemam realiai. 99% žmonių, tai mes čia tiesiog kalbam savo nuomonės, sakom ir tiek. Ai. Nu, jis to nepadarė, čia aš galvojau, kai jis tą padarys su to klausimu, bet gal netoks atsakymas buvo iš to studento tipo, tai, nu, ir pasidavė. Bet jo, dažnai tai padaro, ypač Crowder'is.
Point, which is that competing against men, it was dominating and whatever. And in the case of like Leah Thomas competing against men, it was more so just to say that like he was competing against men while he was on hormones. But my greater sort of, because you do bring up a good point, which is that it is more.
Pala, nesupratau, what? Nu, jie matai, kai kalba apie tą Leah Thomas, man atrodo, kalba dabar, tai, nu, tipo, kai čia timeline'ui maždaug nustatyti. Kai kalba ten prieš 10 metų prieš jos transitioną, vadina he, kad būtų aiškiau apie kokią kompeticiją kalba, kokias varžybas, tipo, nu, diferencijuoja. Dabar, kai apie dabar kalba, tai būtų vadino she, tipo, man atrodo, ir Crowder'is netgi vadino, I'm not sure, bet, nu, manau, nu, logiška, nes kitaip labai būtų painu šnekėti. Iki transitiono, nu, tu, man atrodo, gali trans žmogų vadinti. Jeigu ypač, nu, va, tokiam kontekste kalbėjo apie kad jisai kovojo prieš kitus, bet tada jis transitionino ir patapo tipo moterim ir tada šį sakyti turbūt taip logiška, ne? Manau, it's fine.
More than one, like who is going to be harmed. And I don't think, in my mind, there's a perfect answer to this sort of, because in my mind, there's a couple different options. It's either you...
Okay, like what?
Exclude transgender people entirely from competing.
And that's not what I'm suggesting.
Yeah, totally. I don't think
they just compete with their biological sex.
Right, yeah. So, and then there is the other option of letting them compete with their biological sex. I believe you do run into the same problems, which is that if you are to let biological women compete.
Denveri labas. Aukščiausio meistriškumo sporte nenaudokit dopingo, bet virsti iš vyro į moterį, it's okay, blėt pasaulį. Matai, vien tas pasakymas at face value tipo jo, nu, aš sakau, čia labai atrodo kaip amerikietiškas dalykas. Bet vien tas pasakymas neapgina to argumento, kad tipo, nu, blėt, taigi ji moteris, taigi jis vyras. Vien tas pasakymas, kad tipo, nu, akivaizdu, tai techniškai nieko neįrodo. Pavyzdžiui, nu, su dopingu lyginimas, ne? O jeigu išeis mokslinis tyrimas, ir labai užtikrina, nu, ir geras mokslinis tyrimas, kuris pasakys, kad, nu, kai naudoji tą hormonų replacement pakeitimo tą terapiją ir panašiai, kad tu negauni jokio edžo arba ten gauni mėnesiui ten ar panašiai. Ir realiai jokio pranašumo neturi. Ar tu vis dar laikytumės tokios pačios nuomonės, ar vis dėlto turėtume pakeisti nuomonę. Nes dopingas yra ištirtas ir akivaizdu, kai jisai suteikia didelį pranašumą. Hormonų tas pavirtimas, kaip čia lyties keitimas, visos tas transitionas. Vat ir yra diskutuotina, nes mokslo tame dar nėra. Ar jis tikrai suteikia pranašumą, ar ne, kokiam sporte. Matai? Tai kol tas pasakymas yra greičiausiai dideliai daugumai žmonių pirma mintis bus atėjus, jeigu mes norim žinoti ir tiksliai išsiaiškinti, kaip čia yra. Tam reikia daug daugiau tyrimų ir vat, nėra taip juoda balta, kaip pirmai gali atrodyti, I guess. Bet jo.
With transgender men who were once women, you're essentially pitting women against, in your mind, other women who are just basically doping legally because they're on hormones or they're taking some sort of testosterone or something like that. So you run into the same problem when they're competing as like who they were assigned, what their gender was biologically at birth. You see what I'm saying?
Are you saying a biological woman competing
against a trans man who was previously a woman?
Hold on a second. Let's just stick with the term biology here because using gender terms. So a biological woman competing against a biological...
Įdomu kaip su estrogenu, ką turiu minėti, testosteronas, taigės, bet transmėlis nepryksta pilos žilgas. Visų pirma, nereikia pamiršti, kad visiškai niekam nerūpi trans vyrai. Čia kalba eina tik apie, tipo... Man atrodo, jeigu ir yra, tai praktiškai jokių pavyzdžių, kur trans vyrai dalyvauja vyrų sporte. Kad, tipo, moteris transitionai vyrus ir dalyvauja vyrų sporte. Praškai jokių. Ir tai visiškai niekam nerūpi. Nes vyrų sportas, what the fuck, niekam nerūpi. Bet va, moterų sportas ir tada jau visi kalbės. Tai čia nepamirškim ir to dalyko. Bet jo, kiek žinau, praktiškai pavyzdžių nebuvo. Ten apart kažkokio obscure sporto, kur ten nieks nedalyvauja net. Jo, Sirvankukai, jo, trans vyras ir moteris į vyrą pavirtus. Taip išsireiškim, jo. HRT yra viena, o super psychological dozės vėlgi kita. Anyway, jo suprantu, kas kaip, bet iš kitos pusės pas jau natūraliai dominuoja kiti hormonai, jis juos net pažabodamas juos, tarkim, slopindamas, jis vis tiek turi nemažai šitą. Aš visiškai pritariu, aš poziciją savo pasakiau varlį, aš visiškai pritariu. Aš sakau tik, kad tą argumentą reiktų pakeisti kitą, nes vat kaip ir tas studentas ir vat tą, kur tu parašėjai, tai argumentai, kurie nėra logiški labai. Vien pasakymas, kaip ten studentas pasako, vat kadangi nėra dar daug labai tų trans moterų, kurios turi rezultatus aukštus, tai tipo nėra problemos. Tai nėra logiškas argumentas. Lygiai tas, kad pasakyti, kad tipo su dopingu sulyginti irgi techniškai nėra, nes dar trūksta duomenų, bet tiek, kiek duomenų dabar yra, tai visiškai aiškiai tipo kol kas rodo, kad pranašumas išlieka ir jisai yra ir pamatuojamas visai yra, ilgą laiką yra ir tiesiog tai yra nesąžininga biologinė moterim. Asmeniškai, kai esu labai artimai susijęs tiek su AAS, kas yra AAS? Tiek su biohackingu savo sporte, tai tikrai matau, kad ir ateityje geras mokslinis tyrimas, kurių ta tema labai daug esu pravartęs, analizavęs, tai tikrai jis bus ne į jo naudą. Čia ne į kurio naudą, į to studento naudą jo, ne į studento naudą. Aš jo labai nustepčiau, jeigu būtų, nes tipo, man atrodo, mokslas čia gan aiškus yra šitoj vietoj, bet man atrodo, čia nėra įrodymas. Tai tipo laukia, visi duomenų ir tos organizacijos ir panašiai. Turbūt yra daug sunkiau nustatyti, koks pranašumas, koks gali būti leidžiamas pranašumas, ar visos tos problemos išsprendžiamas. Bet čia jau aš nežinau, jo, sudėtinga vis tiek.
Woman, yes, who is on
steroids.
Yeah, like
Okay.
or testosterone. Or they're taking some sort of testosterone or something like that. So you run into the same problem when they're competing as who they were assigned, what their gender was biologically at birth. You see what I'm saying?
Are you saying a biological woman competing
against a trans man who was previously a woman?
Hold on a second. Let's just stick with the term biology here because using gender terms. So a biological woman competing against a biological
woman, yes, who is on
steroids.
Yeah, or testosterone.
Yeah,
which would improve their performance.
Right.
Yeah. So it runs into the same problem in my sense.
Which is exactly what we're allowing with the trans athletes. So the reason I bring that up is because I don't know if you know this, but the International Olympic Committee doesn't require any hormone replacement therapy at all.
Okay.
None. And what happened with Leah Thomas, and this was shocking to me, was now a big reason that the IOC does that is they say, well, we punt it to the organizations of the individual sports. And you and I both know, of course, being on campus, I think you're probably to the left of center, but I don't think you're someone who believes in stifling speech or ideas or shutting people down.
That would be a bad thing.
Yes, exactly. But we both know that smaller sports organizations are more prone to succumbing to the pressure of activist groups, right? So the IOC says, we'll punt it to these organizations. With the NCAA, what happened, and I'm just using this because it's the most recent example.
Yeah.
What happened is the NCAA had rules. They said, you know what, we're going to go up to the national swimming organizing body. I believe it's USA Swimming. I may have that wrong. I think it's USA Swimming.
Okay, sure.
They said 36 months of hormone replacement therapy.
Vakar buvo atėję kažkas pasisveikino, nes net nežinojau, kad aš streaminu ir pamatė, kad aš vienas Discord'e sėdžiu, bet ne.
Okay. The NCAA said, we're not going to do that. You just have to tell us you're doing 12 months of hormone replacement therapy.
Okay.
And you just need to submit one test within 4 weeks of competition, and you're only allowed to have the testosterone levels twice that of a normal female. I
Okay.
believe it's 5 either nanomoles per deciliter or 5 nanograms per deciliter. And they allowed it
like
to
a
10.
ceiling?
It's a
So
ceiling.
you can't go past
You
that.
can't
and then
go
you
past,
can't
but
compete.
Realiai, parašyta, matos? Jo, realiai parašyta vat ant streamo. Nori kokią temą pašnekėti, sure, nori mano nuomonės paklausti, sure, nori papasakoti kažką, sure. Tipo, visiškai open, kam tik nori, ko tik nori. Gali turėti temą, gali tiesiog norėti, nu, priklauso realiai, jo, gali pamėginti lošais. Priklauso, ko tu pats nori iš to tipo dialogo kažkokio. Gal kažkam įdomi nuomonė apie kažką, gal kažkas kažko paklaus nori, gal kažkas tiesiog papasakot kažką, nu, tipo, visiškai free toks.
But for a trans athlete, you can't go past 10.
Okay.
Which is 2 times that of a woman. So it would be like you going into a sport. Have you ever played sports?
I have, yes.
Okay, so what sport? What's your sport?
Basketball.
Oh, basketball.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, you can't find a juicer in professional basketball, right?
No.
No, of course not. They're all natural.
Yeah.
But it would be like telling LeBron James, or it would be like telling, I don't follow college basketball, but whoever's good in college basketball, it'd be like saying, okay, look, you're not allowed to do steroids. You say you're not doing them for 12 months, and then within 4 weeks, you just submit a blood test where you only have 2 times the testosterone levels of your male counterparts.
Okay.
You know, we always talk about steroids in sports, right?
Yeah.
And how it's become easier to beat these sort of tests, and the tests become more elaborate. This is a cheat sheet to transgender males, to biological males claiming to be women, on how to cheat. We're only going to need a test within 4 weeks, and you're still allowed to have 2 times the levels.
Okay.
And even then, you know, what's also important is, and I understand what you're saying. I guess I don't know what your position is. My position is biological males compete with biological males. Biological females compete with biological females. That was a position of even modern transgender activists until just really 2-3 years ago, because all sports are different. That's biology.
Yeah.
Now we're at a point where we're trying to make the argument that, well, if they undergo hormone replacement therapy for a year, they don't have the... And that's also not true. The medical literature, this isn't up to date with the data. They only lose about 5% of their strength. We're talking not just strength.
I mean, it
we're talking
varies.
about ligament
I will
strength.
say
It's about 5%, according to the medical literature. They lose about 5% in 12 months. Okay, I've seen it as high as 7.
Okay.
The most legitimate study that I've seen, the most legitimate study is
what
5.
You're measuring, like physical strength or endurance,
Physical
or oxygen
strength,
capacity,
muscle area, total muscle volume, muscle density.
See, volume and
connective
density are
tissue
not
strength, for example, male connective tissue strength, ligament strength, tendon strength is 80% higher. Red blood cell count, VO2 max, overall lung capacity, lever arms, longer, bone density. The list goes on and on and on. These don't go away with 12 months. They don't even go away with 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue things like wingspan, bone density, all that stuff is the same. But like certain, rather
you'd argue bone density is the same between a male and a female?
Oh no, I was saying after you are on hormones for a while, your wingspan, things like that sort of like your height is not necessarily going to change. Although that does happen sometimes, I think, but I don't think that's a result of being on estrogen.
You're saying, your wingspan wouldn't change exactly. You would still enjoy the lengthened wingspan of being a biological male.
But I do think there are certain physical attributes that do change. Like as far as like strength is a big one. Like they'd be like how many push-ups you can do. There's studies where they'll test pre and post transition.
It gets lower.
Yeah. Well, it evens out pretty much for the most part.
Not in the studies that I've seen. No.
I guess so. Yeah, and this is another one where we can just go back and forth, your word, my word. I don't really want to camp out on that. I think we can just sort of.
Jo, bet ta prasme, aš nežinau, jis pirmą padaro tą tokį klaimą, kad, čia yra studies, kurie rodo, kad, matai, mažiau padaro išsilygina, bet I guess tam ir yra studies daromi ir dabar, kiek aš žinau, didžioji dauguma studies, kur yra išėję, rodo, kad pranašumas išlieka daug metų, arba mažas, arba didelis, išlieka daug metų po visų tų placementų ir vis tiek turi pranašumą. Tai tada kam jam spekuliuoti, kam studentui sakyti tiek daug, aš manau, ar dar kažkam, tai tada jeigu mes žiūrim tik iš mokslo pusės, tada išeina tyrimai dabar tokie ir neleidžiam dalyvauti, labai viskas aišku. Kam tada diskutuoti ir debatint? Nes jeigu, dabar apeliuoja pats į mokslą, tai mokslas dabar taip lyg tai sako, tyrimai tokie padaryti, kol nėra priežasties ir negalim leisti tada. Nematau čia argumentų.
Agree to disagree.
Well, I think the data is pretty clear, and I think, look, let's say that you're correct.
Yeah.
Let's say that there are studies out there that show after a year of testosterone suppression, everything is the same.
Sure.
Let's assume that's correct. I don't believe so,
No.
but let's assume it's correct. Still doesn't bring us to a solution, does it?
Not a very clean one, no. But
So what are you suggesting? I'm saying that biological males compete with biological
Yeah.
males because I believe someone also needs to advocate for biological females. That's why Title IX exists.
yeah.
Your suggestion is
My suggestion is to let like trans athletes play with. So like I just say let trans men compete in men's sports and let trans women compete in women's sports.
Right.
Solely
so
from
when you say trans men, again, you're using a gender. So you're arguing that gender and sex are the same.
no, not necessarily.
Well, because you're saying let trans men compete in
Yeah.
men's sports, let
Yeah, yeah.
trans women. What you're really saying is biological males who identify as women compete in women's sports. And sports are separated by biology. There's no getting around that. So if you were saying,
yeah, but it's not like a constant, like a law of nature or something like that that can change.
it has
What
been a
can
constant,
change?
But
and
it's
for
not-
a very
it's
good
not,
reason.
you know,
It's the same
it-
reason we have weight
it
classes.
can
It's the same
change.
reason we have age divisions.
It's not like gravity that you can't, you know what I mean? Like it's a construct that we can morph if we find the social.
Jo, kodėl tas konstruktas buvo padarytas. Čia tipo, kalba apie tai, kad va, mes čia sukūrėm taisyklės, kad moteris tik su moterim sportą, nu, kad atskirta vyrai tik su vyrais. Ta prasme, žaibys yra kaip ten 18-19 metų žmonės galvoja, kad jie geriau pasaulyje kažką padarys, tiesiog sukurs taisyklės geresnės, kurios ten buvo tūkstančius metų, net nesuprasdami, kodėl ir iš vis atsirado tos taisyklės. Turbūt yra gera priežastis, kad tos taisyklės būtų atsiradusios, ne? Oi, nenorėjau šitą leisti. Ir gal ne visą laiką, ir galima klausimų, bet nereikia galvoti, kad tiesiog ateisi ir pakeisi pasaulį geresnę pusę, graudamas ten tūkstančius metų tipo taisyklės egzistavusias vien dėl to, kad tu, ten, nežinau, aktyvistai kažkokie kažkur kažką pasakė.
Social utility for it, you see what I'm saying?
And what would the social utility be?
So
To upending based on sparse or non-existent clinical data that you're mentioning, what would the upside be to allowing biological males to beat
Yeah, for
biological
sure.
women?
Yeah,
because
for
you know
sure.
it's not going the other direction. You and I both know that, right? There's the lab study and then there's the real life study. Biological women are not competing and beating men, biological
no,
men
I
in
mean,
sports.
listen,
It's
I
only
will-
going one
listen,
way.
biological differences between men and women on general do exist, right? And so I'm definitely not going to argue with that. But when you bring trans people into the equation, I'm looking at it from the perspective of what is going to, like, it's like a harm reduction type of, like, a perspective that I'm coming at it from. So it goes back to my earlier point, which is, even if you wanted to say, okay, if biological men and biological women compete in, like, separate sports, and then, like, it doesn't matter if you transition over or not, you have to compete with who you were biologically assigned with at birth. It still just creates the same problem where women who want to transition to men have to compete against women, and then it's not fair to the women who are getting, you know, beat up on by this transition, like this trans man
Yeah.
who is taking hormones and is taking.
Well, they shouldn't be allowed to compete.
Okay, so you're saying,
Yeah,
so is that your opinion?
yeah.
Ta prasme, jo, nu, tipo, bet, jo, tai steroidus apibūdina, net techniškai. Iš čia kalba, jeigu moteris paima ten, tarkim, transitioną į vyrą, nu, ten, I guess, hormonų terapiją irgi daro, testosteroną vartoja kažko kitokį. Tai kai jinai turėtų dalyvauti tada su moterimis sporte ir tai jau būtų, nu, nesąžininga irgi. Tai taip, ir neleistų jam dalyvauti, nes jos, tipo, nu, čia vos nedopinimas jau. I don't know. Sakau, vat, Stevenas Crowderis prieš ką gali, blėt, kalbėti ir prieš ką kalba. Prieš studentą, kuris nemąstė net 5 minutės tą temą, niekad nebuvo ant popieriaus ar kažką, nežinau, pasirašė savo argumentų ir net nepabandė gerai paklausti klausimo, kaip aš pats sunaikinčiau tą argumentą, kaip pats atsakyčiau. Nu, tipo, tai visiškai nepasiruošė žmogus. Na, jeigu galvot, kad AAS nevartoja... ką reiškia AAS, by the way? Aš klausiau to, man atrodo, praleidau. Ne, nepraleidau. Šiais metais gal praeitais olimpinėse vyras taip daug laimėjo, tai what the fuck. Nelaimėjo nieko, kiek aš pamenu. Paskutinė buvo ta trans moteris. Čia mes kalbėjom apie tas olimpinės ir stebėjau aš tos rezultatus, kiek žinau. Aš žinau, apie ką tu būtent kalbi, bet kiek aš pamenu. Yra pavyzdžių, nu, bet žodžiu, man atrodo, praleidėtų visą tą pokalbį, tai dabar šokti tokį argumentą. Good.
Yes, a woman who is taking anabolics.
Yeah.
Effectively, right?
It's transitioning to
A woman who's taking a woman who's taking anabolics.
Sure.
Let's boil this down to biological terms. A woman who's taking testosterone.
Sure.
IAS tai tiesiog tie steroidai, man nesilavinusiam ta tema, tai aš nežinau, ten pavadinimą aš tiesiog vadinu steroidais, tai kažkokie ten, vaistai, papildai, whatever, kurie duoda tau pranašumą, jo. Nes aš nesidomėjęs, aš nieko nenusimonu apie ten. Bet jo, aš kiek žinau, kad paplitę yra ir sporte vis tiek, ten rusus taigi banina ištisai, ten už tą tenais. Čia kaip čitinimas geimuose, žinai, arba ten botinimas geimuose. Gali užbaninti, gali uždrausti, vis tiek ras kaip apeiti, ras kaip išvengti testų ir panašiai. Tai tikrai, manau, yra, bet tema yra, ne apie tai. Tema yra apie pačias taisyklės, kas leistina, kas neleistina. O jau tas enforcinimas taisyklių čia yra atskira tema,
No non-trans identifying woman is allowed to do that. They're banned from sport.
Okay.
It's illegal.
Okay.
Should be illegal regardless of how you identify.
Okay.
They shouldn't be allowed to beat up on women, just like a woman shouldn't be allowed to take anabolic steroids and beat up on women.
Okay. And that is a fine position to hold. It's not my position.
That's a harm reduction position. So
It
that's
is,
my
for
harm
sure.
reduction
Yeah,
position.
it is.
What's the harm reduction you're saying, your harm reduction model?
Yeah.
In allowing biological men to beat women?
I would like as many people to participate in sports as possible while still keeping, because like you said, the trans community is a fairly small one. This is not a sort of an epidemic or a pandemic like some maybe make it out to be. It's a small,
It's not yet. No, it's not. Yeah, it's not
Sure,
yet.
it's not yet.
Because
Iš harm reduction pozicijos, aš galvoju, gerai, kaip tu gali ir tą poziciją turėti tada? Jeigu mes žiūrėsim iš tai, kad sumažinti, kaip čia lietuviškai išvesti, skausmą sumažinti kančią. Jeigu įsivaizduokim, trans moteris yra antiek kenčiančios, kad jom neleidžia dalyvauti sporte ir tu nori jom palengvinti gyvenimą ir maždaug gerai, jūs turit pranašumą ten turėsit, bet tiek to dalyvaukit, nesižudykit tenais, nekentėkit emociškai. Ir mes taip sumažinam žalą. Bet gerai, su kiekviena trans moterim, kuri dalyvaus sporte, tu pakeli žalą, tą skausmą moteriai, kuri 3 ar 4 metus sportavo, ten natūraliai, tarkim, treniravosi ir paskui pistijos vietą atėmė kažkas, kas dopinimu užsiema. Ar turėjo pranašumą. Nebūtinai 1 vietą, nebūtinai 3, bet jos kokią 8 ar 15 vietą užėmė ten 5 trans moteris ir ją išstūmė ten iš top 20 ir jinai nepateko į kokį ten top 20-uką, nepateko į playoffus ir jos svajonė ten kažkur sporto toliau žlunga. Tipo, už kiekvieną žmogų, kuriam tu duodi šitą pranašumą ir galimybę dalyvauti, tu kažkam kitam suteiki tą skausmą. Tai koks čia harm reductionas? Tai nesigautų tiesiog harm reductionas. Tai nėra išeitis tada, jeigu mes norim harm reduction užsiminėti. 100% taip, mano sportas, kultūrizmas ten kitaip, bet pažinęs savo kūno organizmą ir dalyvaudamas šiame sporte, tai atsirado ir tas biohackinimas, per kurį daug susipažinau su kitomis sporto šakomis, naudojamais preparatais ir panašiai, rodėme škūnelį, nepagautas nevagis, bet garantuoju, kad 25. Ja, aš maždaug taip irgi įsivaizduoju. Žinau, kad Hollywoode yra labai paplitę ten, kur net nėra taisyklių, tipo, kad, negalim ar kažką, bet ten tie visi Marvel aktoriai ir panašiai, ten superherojų, tie visi aktoriai tenais ir jie užsikačialina absurdiškai greitai, ten yra dabar jau, matau, ir PewDiePie šnekėjęs apie tai yra, kad ten yra žiauriai paplitę, bet niekas negali šnekėti, nes bijo darbus prarasti. Bet pas jos nėra reguliacijų, tipo, ten ir panašiai, tipo, nėra taisyklė, nesivaržo prieš nieką, bet ten, tipo, labai paplitę, paskui jie pratavinėja tenais pamokas YouTube'ai, ten ir Instagramuose visuose. Aš apie tą, čia matau, PewDiePie apie tą visą ir šnekėjo. Žodžiu, čia. Manau, kad tai yra labai labai paplitę. Ir, tiesiog, Denveris tame gyvena ir jisai tą sako. Tai aš manau, šitoje vietoje galima paprūvinti savo nuomonę, paklausant autoritetingo žmogaus toje srityje, tipo, ir tiek. Nelabai scientific, bet manau, sunku būtų ginčyti priešingą tipo poziciją. Ilgai pasiknysus galima ne vieną cycle rast aktorių, kurie tam tikrom roliam turi būti užsivarę, tai čia viskas okei, kitas dalykas, kad tu naudoji, tai sporte ir sakai, kad nenaudoji, jo, nu, tai bet ką ir sakau, tipo, ten filme tu prieš nieką nesivaržai, tiesiog, nu, su savo kūnu darai, ką nori, tipo, aš nematau didelės problemos. Tik tai nėra sąžininga ir nėra, nu, kaip čia, nėra nuoširdu, kai jie paskui atsako, ten, kai jų klausia, ten maži fanai, vaikai, kaip čia sportuoja, kaip užsikačialina, tai čia natūraliai, va, gera mityba, sportas. No, fuck you. Tai yra medicina ir chemikalai ir ten, tipo, nu, kad ir gal ir sveika ten, ten daktarai, viską. Nu, bet tai nėra, va, tiesiog sveikai valgyk ir sportuok ir pasieksi per 3 mėnesius Batmano, tipo, kūną. Tipo, yeah, right. Tai tiesiog pats nenuoširdumas, bet, nu, pagal įstatymą ten čiųjų nieko. Apšiai jokių problemų nėra, nes who gives a shit, prieš nieką nesivaržu.
But I would rather not act on. And if it does change and it becomes a really big problem, then maybe we can readdress how we sort of go about this.
So let a problem that all data would indicate is likely going to happen, and even the small sample sizes that we have, allow that problem to run its course, allow it to rob women of opportunities, allow it to create concussions and broken orbital bones like we've seen in women's combat sports, because we don't know how bad it'll be yet, and then reverse course if it gets worse.
My argument would be that it is not a problem yet. Once it does become a problem, then we can address it. But as
nu, negalima taip mąstyti visų pirma. Destiny turėjo argumentą, kad esmė bus, kad Destiny argumentas buvo tas, kad bus daug sunkiau cancelinti, tarkim, tą visą. Nu, tipo, jeigu dabar leistum dalyvauti, tos trans moteris ten pasiektų rezultatų, titulų ir panašiai. Ir jeigu tai pasidarys problema vieną dieną, va, kad nu tikrai jau daug dominuoja ir va, kaip jisai sako, dabar nėra problema, bet bus gal ir tada galėsim spręsti. Tada bus daug sunkiau spręsti. Nes tada reikės cancelinti pasiekimus, kas būtų šičiau visiškas tipo tų trans moterų. Tai tipo, kad tada niekas tikrai neišspręstų tos problemos ir būtų moterų sportas visiškai sunaikintas iš esmės. Toks buvo Destiny argumentas. Ir turbūt logiška taip galvoti būtų, nes tikrai, nu pagalvokit, trans moteris ten laimėjo titulus ir po 2 metų daugiau jų dalyvauja ir pasidaro problemą. Ir nu, gerai, sorry, mums reikia dabar... Aš įdomu, galėsiu pajudėti čia. Va. Reikia, tipo, kažką daryti, kad įspręsti ir mes atimam iš tavęs titulą, nes tu jį nesąžiningai gavai. Taip niekad nebus. Ta prasme, visus ten nukancelintų, kurie tą pasiūlytų, nes sakytų, kad čia trans moteris engia ir panašiai. Bet, jo, čia, bet, nu, netgi paėmus tą argumentą. Pats argumentas yra dam, mes apie tą jau kalbėjom, kad tas argumentas yra dam ir, nu, čia apie bet kokią temą kalbant. Tipo, davai duodam visiems 5-mečiam vaikam užtaisytus ginklus. Kaip bus problema, su tuo tada išspręsim, dabar tai nematau problemos, va aš savo sūnų daviau, jis palaikė ir nenušovė nieko. Matai, nėra problemas. Nu, tas argumentas per 5 sekundės pamastymo, ko šitas studentas nepadarė, todėl Crowderis ir laimės tą tipo diskusiją ir todėl ir YouTube įsidėjo. Nu, tai yra, tipo... Aktorius dar aktorius, bet koks šitam sporte influencas, kai visi eina į salę ir galvoja, kad va reikia tą nedaryti, o tą reikia daryti tik dėl to, kad pas tave kūne plaukia 10 žmonių hormonų kiekis ir dar N dalyko, aišku, iš kitos pusės jav ir kitur, tai ganėtinai atvira diskusija, bet Lietuvoje žmonių požiūris visą šitą reikalą labai prastas, čia didelis tabu apie tai kalbėti, kai iš esmės blogai, nes edukacija ir ta pačia tema trūksta. Lietuvoje, nu, Amerikoje tai net nėra, žinok, labai kalbama tema, tai irgi gan tabu, nes ten Hollywoodo ta, nu, gan mažai šneka apie tai, by the way. Bet Lietuvoje yra apskritai problema su visom temom, kad labai mažai kas yra šnekama. Pažiūrėti, nu, galima netgi pažiūrėti pas mus ir tos pačius streamerius ir panašiai, kodėl aš pradėjau tą Open Discord daryti ir, nu, ir ilgą laiką jau aš mėginu tos pasikalbėjimus daryti ir panašiai, bet labai sunku yra. Nes žmonės nieko nesidomi ir nieko nenori šnekėti. Pas mus nėra, nei ten kažkoks žinios nėra gerbiamos, jeigu tu kažko pasidomėsi, tave ne tai, kad ten gerbs kažką ar su tame šnekėto tave duhins. Pas mus yra aukštinami veikėjai kaip meibechai ir vėlgi, aš stumsiu ant sponsorius, kiek tik turėsiu gyvybę savo organizme. Tipo, sponsorius va tokie, jis yra palaikomas už savo pozicijas, tai tik mano nuomonė, kurios niekad negali apginti, nes turi 30 atmazų. Tai kol nieks nenorės šnekėti, kol publika bus tokia, kol nebus jokių dialogų, tol ir nesikeis į geresnę pusę, bet aš jau, kad po truputį pradės žmonės, nes matot, vat, yra toks dalykas. Man atrodo, tai yra snowball efektas ir ego turėtų įsijungti. Jeigu tu ateisi kokį vieną pokalbį, ir tave tiesiog sunešios žodžiais, argumentais. Ir jeigu kažkoks pasirodys lašas tokio ego, kad gerai, aš kitam pokalbiui pasiruošiu. Surasiu straipsnį, paskaitysiu biškai, skirsiu valandą savo gyvenimo, kad actually edukuot save kažkokią temą. Jeigu kažkokį tokį sužadintum tu vienam streamerį, tu tada automatiškai sužadinsi jo bendruomenę. Kad jie pradės irgi nomėtis. Jie tada padės tam streameriui straipsnius mėtydami kažkaip, kad laimėtų tada prieš tą jobaną karalių, žinai, kokie, čia kaip pavyzdys, tipo diskusija, ne? Kažkokia tema. Ir tai jau yra pergalė, nes tada daug daugiau žmonių domisi. Ir dialogas vyksta ir mes turim sceną tam. Dabar tos scenos nėra. Dabar mes turėjom Discord'e ten rajono kunigą, kur klikė keiksmažodžius viens į kitą. Ok. Tada turim dar kokį veikėją, kur ne tik aš šnekėtų kažkokią temą, kur tiesiog tai mano nuomonė, tas visą laiką teisus, pašol nahui. Ir visą laiką tokių bus. Bet aš tikrai tikiu, kad galima kažkaip sukurti tą tokią sceną, kur bus keletas žmonių, su kuriais galės ir actually diskusiją turėti. Ir kad žmonės, kurie gal su to nesusidūrė, pamatys, kad, čia gal yra visai įdomu. Tu kažkam apie kažką turi nuomonę. Kitas turi kitą nuomonę. Kuris iš jūsų teisus. Ir tu tiesiog eini šnekėti. Ir tu pats pastebėsi, galbūt tavo publika pastebės, kad kažkuri pozicija tipo nebuvo gal visai mano gerai apmąstyti. Aišku, to nieks nepripažins gyvai dialogę, čia to galime net nesitikėti, bet tada po streamo ar po dienos ar po 2 pamastys šiek tiek tą temą, pasidomės šiek tiek tą temą, gal šiek tiek kitaip pažiūrės ir biškai paeis į priekį kaip žmonės. Bet aš visiškai pritariu, kad Lietuvoje labai labai mažai kas šneka apskritai tabų temom ar apskritai temom, bet būtent ta steroidų tema, tai matau ir Amerikoje dar gan didelis tabų iš tikrųjų.
As of right now, in the current moment, I don't see it as being problematic.
So I think in your harm reduction, you are failing to take into account one large group of people.
Okay.
You're taking into account a very small group of people, and I don't think but you've conflated gender and sex, which is why modern gender theory is one I disagree with, because it's not a tenable position.
Sure.
Because everything that you have discussed is basically equating gender with sex at that point. That's the only way you can argue that people who identify a certain way should be able to compete with people who are biologically female. But let's say it's 1%.
Gali būt. Tikrai gali būt. Vien tai, kad PewDiePie padarė apie tai video, jau parodo, kad tikrai biškai labiau mainstream patampanti tema. Tai for sure.
The population that's trans. Okay? In your harm reduction approach, who are you ignoring?
Well, I'm assuming from your perspective it'd be biological women, right? Yeah. But you would have to sort of explain to me why that is the case. If it is 1% of people who are trans,
well, what's the purpose to sports?
Esmė, kad daugiau nei pusė net nemoka interpretuoti mokslinių tyrimų ir analizuoti jų, perskaitė kažkokį one-sided tyrimą, kurie ir buvo daromi tam, kad palaikyti vieną pusę, o tokių yra tikrai daug, tada atsiranda influencerių, kurie čia ir pikina. True, čia irgi yra problema, nes kai diskusija jau daisik, matai, Denverį, aš visiškai pritariu, mokslas yra priprintus medijoje, skaito ir panašiai, bet pirmą reikia mums kaip visuomeniai prieiti prie to, kol žmonės pradės nešti tos straipsnius jau. Tai reiškia, jau bus paskaitę, pasidomėję, radę kažką ir gal paskaitę. Ir kai mes jau prieisim prie tos stadijos, tai jau būtų antie geras žingsnis. Nes toj stadijoje tu tada jau gali pradėti diskutuoti ir gerai, ar šitas tyrimas yra gerai atliktas. Gal pasikviečiame ekspertą, kuris paaiškins, ką tas tyrimas reiškia iš viso. Nes mes ką abstraktą paskaitysim tyrimo ir gal kažką suprasim, gal ne, gal conclusioną paskaitysim. Paprastas žmogus mes net nesuprasim pusę terminų, ką jie sako. Bet iki to reikia daryti, kol žmogus ateis ir kažkokį straipsnį palinkins, žinai. Čia jau būtų jau didžiulis progresas. Bet apie tą irgi atskira jau tema yra didelė ir geriausia, kur aš per pasikalbėjimus, gal aš dar tą video turiu, kaip tikrinu šaltinius ir viską. Kažkur turbūt yra dar, gal pas mane žemiau streamo yra. Gal ir neturiu. Tai jo, tenais buvo tas video, kaip pasirinkti informaciją ir panašiai, kur aš ir paskui tą pavyzdį pateikiu, kur priprinta, Delfi reportina kaip naujieną, tada visi cituoja tą naujieną, tada paaiškėja, kad tai nebuvo teisybė, nes tai priprintas buvo ir sako, mokslas klysta visą laiką ir panašiai. Ir kalbant apie sportą, tai kad toj pačioj sportuojančių grupiai Facebook gali pamatyti, kad N žmonių net neskiria angliavandenų nuo baltymų, tai ką jau norėt, kad jie atsivestų PubMedo straipsnį kaip pavyzdys ir perskaitytų kelias eilutes, kurias tikrai nėra taip lengva skaityti. Man atrodo, Facebook'e nėra žmonių, kurie skaityti moka. Jie moka rašyti komentarus, bet aš netikiu, kad ten yra žmonių, kurie skaityti moka. Apie ką beįsijungtum? Apie vakcinas, apie sportą, įsijungsi straipsnį, kur Mia Khalifa buvus porno žvaigždė, dabar kritikuoja porno industriją, ten atsiversi komentarus, paskaitysi. Man atrodo, ten žmonės nėra gyvenime nieko skaitę planetai. Legit. Kokią temą be atsiverstum? Apie ką tai bebūtų? Ten tiesiog, jo, Jesus Christ, ten what the fuck. Aš naudoju, aš Messenger naudoju, Eventus naudoju, bet, čia kalbam apie tos komentarus, kur, paspaudė tą comment sekciją. Oh, god, ten tai tiesiog, Ne, aš aišku, čia hiperbolizuoju, ten įsijungsi kokį Malinausko postą, bus heiteriai, bus palaikytojai, bet žmonės, kurie sugeba sakinį surekšti kažkiek. Bet ten jo, tie, žinai, komentarai, kur skaitysi, tie ekspertai, ekspertų visom temom, tai tie žmonės, tai ten,
Why do we play
Organized
sports?
competition. I mean, that's a great question. I don't know. I don't have a philosophical answer for you.
What's
I'm
the
assuming
goal
you
in
do.
sport?
To win, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the only goal in sport.
Have fun along the way, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Have fun along the way.
Camaraderie.
But when we're talking about sports and high-level
Yeah.
sports,
Hey,
like
varžybos.
NCAA, it's not fun.
I mean, they
it's
want
not
to
fun
win,
to be a champion at
obviously.
that
Of
point,
course,
right? It's a very
of course.
difficult life. They've
Yes.
sacrificed a lot.
Yeah.
They've trained a lot. They've run into many complications that people who are not trying to be excellent in their field. I think we would both agree with that, right?
Yes,
it's not really a
definitely.
fun life to be an NCAA silver medalist,
I mean, it
right?
takes discipline for
to be
sure.
an Olympic silver medalist and then get your ass kicked by someone who was a man 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So the purpose is to win. Now, that's why sports exist. The NCAA, right? Collegiate sports. What opportunities do those provide? Would we both agree that they're significant?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Scholarships,
school.
paths to careers,
definitely.
coaching.
Yeah.
Okay. So beyond the actual physical harm which can take place in certain sports, with biological men competing against women, what about all the economic harm? What about all the opportunity costs for these women who've trained their whole lives and they miss out?
Well, so
Because far more of them will be affected than transgender individuals who don't even compete in sport.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean is if we have 1% of transgender individuals right, in the population and not many of them are competing in sports, we're talking about a harm reduction strategy that at the cost of all of the other women in these sports who are vying for these opportunities, we are acquiescing to biological males in the name of harm reduction, but it's actually probably the most harmful thing we can do for women's sports, for female sports.
I guess my argument for that would just be that, you're talking about, you're framing it in a sense that like trans women are taking opportunities from biological women, I assume is the point here.
They are.
Yeah. I would just say that it's not sort of if you want to make, because I do think there is going to be harm done either way, I will agree, but I think it's it's more of a one-to-one thing. You're making it seem like biological women are going to be hurt exponentially more when it's like if a trans woman takes a biological woman's place, that's a one-to-one sort of trade-off. I mean, one or the other is going to take that place of the other person. So it's just depending on who you want to favor as, and it just comes down to I believe.
Tai pala, wait. Tai jo, tai vien tai, kad vienas prie vieno jau būtų blogai ir kodėl mes tą turėtumėm daryti, tai sakau, tai nebūtų tada geras sprendimas problemą ją kažkaip kitaip reikia spręsti. What? Jis tiesiog nubraukė tą, tai čia fine, tipo, tiesiog jo, tegu atima. Nes dabar moteris tada atima iš tų trans moterų vietas. Ne, jos netima nieko, jos dalyvauja savo sporte, kur turi dalyvauti. Trans moteris nori ateiti tą sportą. What?
Believe like what you view it like the women's sports thing is sort of a
Taip pat tu žinai, kad tai yra tūpas žmogus, kai fucking Crowder'is laimi, blėt. Nu, bet čia apskritai pozicija yra gan tūpa. Tipo, tai joks, man atrodo, protingas žmogus atėjęs čia labai gerai nepasirodytų, nes labai sunku tą poziciją dabar apginti, nes mokslas ne jų pusėje. Bet ypo čia patys silpniausi argumentai numato, kad tas žmogus, ble, taip nemastęs ir man tas užpisa. Nes turbūt Crowderis net nesugebėtų normalių pozicijų normaliai apsiginti prieš kai kurios tos Twitch debatorius. Nes, blėt. Yra keletas argumentų, sakau, kur visai gan geri ten atrodė, bet į tai nesivelsim.
Microcosm of the bigger sort of trans.
Bet nieko įtikinamo.
It pivots on.
Well, it shows that modern gender theory can't hold water.
Oh, why is that?
Well, because I've been even at this school and other schools where I said there are only two genders, right? Change my mind, and people go, well, no, gender is separate from sex.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go with that.
Yeah.
But now you're sitting here arguing gender and sex are interchangeable.
I wouldn't argue they're interchangeable.
Well, you are arguing that in the realm of sport.
Not necessarily. No.
Okay, then please clarify, because I just heard you say that biological males, and then you use the term trans women, which is a gender term, right?
Yes.
Trans women is not a biological term. That's a gender term.
Yes.
So you say people of a gender should be allowed to now identify with whatever sex they choose to compete.
I see what you're saying now. So I would like to clarify that then.
Okay.
People who identify as men should be allowed to compete against each other. People who identify as women should be allowed to compete against each other. I make no biological distinctions there.
So a separate division then?
No, not a separate division. I just think that...
Then it brings us back to the same issue. You're saying biological males who identify as trans women, a gender term, brings us right back to the same place, should be able to compete against other people who are separated by sex. There is only an exception for the modern transgender theorists, right? Everywhere else it's separated by biology.
No.
I can't compete against women just because I don't say that I'm a woman.
Yeah.
I could tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, so one, just to that point, I don't think that is something that is really happening, of people just being like, I'm a man, I'm just going to say I'm a woman and go compete against women, and like, I don't think that is a thing that happens. I do believe it is legitimate, like people who are legitimately trying to transition, who want to compete in these sports.
Well, how do you know?
Because I mean, look at Leah Thomas, look at all of the examples that you yourself have cited. I have not seen an example of like a person doing that yet. And if that does happen again, then it becomes a problem, and we figure out a way to address it.
It has happened. And again, just because it hasn't happened yet, that's the argumentum ad novitatum. That's the appeal to novelty, logical fallacy. Well, it hasn't happened yet.
This isn't even, because I do want to go back to the thing you were saying about the men and women, the biological.
Yes. I don't understand how your position. I don't understand how your position is tenable if gender and sex are separate.
So my only point that I would like to make is when you say men's and women's sports.
Yes.
I would like that to just simply mean people who identify as men, people who identify as women.
But it doesn't.
Not right now, no. But it could.
And it doesn't because of biological differences. Sports are separated due to biological differences.
They are right now, yes.
And there's a reason for that.
Well, I mean, not
for the safety of women.
Well, and then it just goes back to the same argument. We kind of are going back to
No, it's not going back to the same argument. You haven't addressed it. For the safety of women.
Well, we went back and forth on the data of does it actually harm women in the sense of like, because I mean, obviously you mentioned like broken orbital bones and all that stuff in combat sports, which injuries are going to happen in the realm of, obviously an orbital bone is a pretty serious, I mean, that's a bad one, but injuries are going to happen in the realm of combat sports, citing that as being dangerous to women.
Do you not believe that there would be more injuries occurring in contact sports if biological men just competed, if there were no men and women's divisions? Do you honestly not believe that would drastically increase the chances of injury?
Well, I think...
Come on, we have people who are walking CTE, right? The lifespan of an O lineman is somewhere in their 40s or 50s in the NFL, and these are 315, 340-pound men, and they're still having to deal with being hit. Do you honestly believe that if we didn't have men and women's division, that a female quarterback being sacked, that a female lineman, you really don't think that there would be an increase in dramatic injuries?
Oh, no, there would, definitely. Good. But I would like to note that, like, obviously...
It hasn't happened yet.
Well, of course there is, differences in men and women, like a big linebacker versus small. But I would like to point out that whenever you do talk about sort of biological differences between...
Why do you do this?
Sorry, I don't know. But whenever you talk about...
Well, do you mean to do this, or was that accidental?
Let's not read too deeply into it. I don't think it's really anything
Well, hold on a second. Is it because I am saying, I think it matters. Biological males. Well... But you did this.
Yeah, so let me get to the point. Is that when you do talk about biological distinctions, what you're really saying are physical, chemical distinctions between people, right? Like, I could say that, a 6'6", 230-pound like linebacker versus like, you know, a college, like a freshman of the same age who's like 5'5" and like 180 pounds or whatever, is not going to be a fair matchup, right? But they're both men. But when you say biological differences, you're talking about physical, you know, competitive advantages that people have regardless of biology. Regardless of what they are assigned at birth, as far as their
regardless of
gender
what biology determines them to be at birth.
But you know, it determines them to an extent. But
Hold on a second.
obviously,
Do you believe that biological male and biological female is assigned at birth, or do you believe that the gender assigned at birth is what can be changed? Because this is very new. You need to understand this.
Oh yeah.
The students I spoke with 2 years ago at this school, the professors never in their wildest dreams would have said biological sex assigned at birth.
Yeah.
Are you suggesting that sex is being assigned rather than being intrinsic? Because that's a whole new thing.
The chromosomes that you are born with are the ones that you have, and it's not a socially constructed thing.
Okay.
You have those chromosomes. It determines a lot about your physical makeup and stuff like that.
Good.
But, you know, and obviously there's
But you know,
intersex people, and it's a spectrum and all that, and it's not a binary, but it is intrinsic, it is biological. You can't, you know, just say that you don't have these certain chromosomes, but I don't think that's the argument people are making. So that would be my, you know.
Well, you don't think what is the argument? Every single person in this country thinks that it's unfair for biological males to compete against biological females.
Oh, no, not in the realm of competition. I'm just simply saying, I don't think anybody is making the argument that you are not born with chromosomes that give you certain, you know, like that differentiate.
Do you understand though that then your position is untenable? Because you're saying there is something that is innate, there is something that is intrinsic, right? There is something that's immutable.
Yeah.
But we need to throw that out the window as it relates to sports and go by gender, which is societal.
I see your point, but the problem is that
sports are not separated by how you identify. They are separated by immutable physical characteristics for the reason of safety and fairness in competition.
So,
can we agree on that?
Well,
that's why they're separated by biology.
I might agree, but if you're going off of specifically, so your definition of why they're separated is immutable physical characteristics for people's safety. I would just make the argument, and fairness, right? I would just make the argument, okay, so we should have smaller men and women compete against each other, and women who are at a better physical, because you would acknowledge that.
We have Division I versus Division III, and we have weight classes. Perfect example.
Sure, yeah,
yes,
exactly.
I agree.
But you would not cross the biological lines to, like, the gender.
Va, priėjom prie to, ką aš sakiau pačioj pradžioj, kad prieina visą laiką argumentas prie to, kad nu, vat mes čia taigi dalinam tuos dabar ten pagal ūgį, tai ką ten vienas jaumingas labai aukštas, tai jam čia būtų sąžininga, tipo, kodėl? Kai kurie yra genetiniai frikai tiesiog, nu, vat vyrai, kai kurie genetiniai frikai, ten daug didesni už kitus ar kažką, tai ką jiem neleisti. Esmė yra, kad vienas yra natūralus dalykas, nu, tiesiog, vat gimė žmogus ir jis turi. Kitas yra tu į savo organizmą vartoji kažkokį ar vaistą, ar chemikalą, ar panašiai. Tai nebūtų sąžininga lyginti dviejų dalykų. Ir vat jie dabar priėjo prie šito realiai. Bet jo, todėl mes turim sporte, nu, yra tos weight classes ir panašiai. Taip, nes, nu, kai kurie būtų visiškai not fair competition. Mes ne tik, kad skirstum vyrai, moteris, vyrai tipo vyrų sportai, moterų sportai ir viskas. Ir paskui ir vyrų sportai yra pagal amžių, pagal ten svorį, kategorijos, taigi viskas ir yra daroma, kad kuo sąžiningiau būtų. Nes ten šnekėjau su Metaxa, jeigu prisimenu, tokį buvo jisai ten kol kalbėjom apie tas weight classes, nu, kad sako jo, ten jeigu atėjo žmogus, kur ten 40 kg daugiau sversi bokso ringą, nu, ten jam daužysis nieko nejaus ten ir, tipo, vapšė pohui, tipo, nu, bet kokį tą lengvą svorį sunaikins, nu, tipo, no, for the most part, I guess.
You know, the sex.
No, because the difference is so vast.
I mean, not for everybody, though, right? I mean, because if you want to make the argument that it is for the safety of people,
it absolutely is. It's unbelievably. The gap is so much larger between men and women. It's not even close. I mean, you can look at again, when you're looking at just Leah Thomas as a recent example, talking about 503rd, I believe, in the 200 or 500 something place, if that time were posted by when he was still competing as a man, not even top 800 in the 500. Right? Yeah. It's a huge, and you're talking about winning one of them, placing fifth in another. It's not even close. Yeah. I mean, even just, do you think Serena Williams and Venus Williams, you think they would do well against top guys?
Oh, no. I should actually clarify that.
Do you think they would even do well against middling guys?
I'm not sure about middling guys, but I will say
do you think they would do well against not good tennis players?
At a high level, there is a complete difference between men and women as far as like physical advantages.
My point is the best female athlete in the world aren't even close to middling to low-end male athletes.
Can you substantiate that claim? That's a pretty...
Venus and Serena Williams, they fought played
Visą laiką jau 10 metų kartos tą pavyzdį, kai ta teniso raketė, ta geriausia ten prieš vapšė 800 ten, tipo vyrą pralošė ten studentą vapšė. Tipo visi tą pavyzdį naudoja šitoje pozicijoje jau labai ilgą laiką, nors sunku nenaudoti tą pavyzdį, nes jis labai gerai iliustruoja masyvų skirtumą, kuris yra realiai tam aukščiausiam lygiai tipo.
Played tennis against a guy who was ranked 204th, I believe, and he beat both of them in one afternoon.
It's kind of an
And he was a drunk.
I feel like that's an anecdotal maybe point to make, right?
It's not
What?
you just
Ne,
have to
čia
kind of
tikra
point
istorija.
to an example.
Yeah.
Oh my god, jis nežino, ką reiškia anekdotinis. Oh my god, dar vienas, blėt, kaip tas iš Roberto Ščeto, tas vaikis, kur nežino, ką reiškia anekdotinė istorija žmonės. Oh my god. Ir kodėl visą laiką jie eina kalbėti su Crowderiu, kodėl tik jie, ar čia Dunning-Krugerio efektas įsijungia, kur žmonės, kurie mažiausiai nusimano, galvoja, kad nusimano dahuje ir todėl eina šnekėti. Nes kodėl, blėt, tai būna, galėtų normali diskusija būti, jeigu žmogus eitų, kuris daugiau nusimano, tipo, bent jau galėtų gal, aišku, tada nebūtų kontento, gal net nebūtų ir idėja čia, bet I don't know, man. Iš dalies tai čia tokia tema, kur net nereikia lysti į mokslą ar kažkokias geras diskusijas ir analizavimą, bent šiek tiek supranti savo hormonus, savo organizmą ir iškart gali pasakyti, kas dabar vyksta, yra bullshit. Aš manau, niekada nereikia sakyti, kad pažiūrėjau, maždaug suprantam ir nereikia čia lysti į mokslą. Man atrodo, mokslas yra vienintelis procesas ir mokslinis procesas, vienintelis procesas, kur eina link tikro žinojimo. Iki kol mokslas nėra to padaręs, tu gali įtarti, tu gali gan užtikrintas būti, bet tu negali žinoti. Užtikrintai žinoti. Tikrai negali, nes mokslo duomenys reikalingi. O čia yra tų klausimų, yra ir, žinai, ateina... Tu gali, tipo, jeigu mes norime sakyti klausimą, gal ir galima leisti dalyvauti tada sporte. Pavyzdžiui, jeigu išeitų stadija, ne, kuris pasakytų, kad moteris, kuri naudojo tą hormonų pakeitimo treatmentą tam tikrą laiką, tam tikrą amžiaus, praktiškai jokio išmatuojamo pranašumo neturi prieš biologinės moteris. Ir mes todėl jai leidžiam dalyvauti sporto šakoje. Ok, nemanau, kad tada galėtų sakyti priešingai. Jeigu išėjo moksliniai tyrimai, kurie atrodo, kad tam tikram amžiui padarius transitioną su tam tikrais preparatais, tu negauni jokio edžio. Ir mokslas tą, suportintų. Tada nebūtų argumento sakyti, kad nesąžininga, tada būtent joms galėtų leisti dalyvauti. Ir čia reikia, to mokslo tikslumo reikia. Matai, okei. Šitas argumentas irgi turbūt gali būti daromas, bet yra keletas istorijoje pavyzdžių, kur statistika buvo labai neteisingai pritaikoma ir labai galima jiem manipuliuoti, tipo, buvo nuteisti žmonės myriop su bloga statistika, kuris ten Veritasiumo, gal 3 kanalas apie tai keletą video padarė. Nes kartais ta statistika yra labai apgaulinga, tipo, koks šansas, kad taip atsitiks? Neįmanoma, jis kaltas tikrai. Ar tenais, tai vien tas irgi nėra pakankamai rodyti. Kad ir, tipo, žinai, kaip aš kritikuoju tą studentą dėl to, kad jisai silpnus argumentus atsineša, lygiai taip pat, jeigu mano poziciją mėgint palaikyti, tai būtų irgi gan silpni argumentai, nes juos lengva parodyti kitais pavyzdžiais ar panašiai, parodyti, kad jie techniškai ne visą laiką teisingi būtų. Šitam atveju greičiausiai teisingi būtų. Bet aš atakoju patį argumentą, žinai, kad galima geresnius sugalvoti. Dabar mokslas tiesiog rodo ir labai sunku pasiginčyti priešingai. Būtų mokslas rodo, kad yra pranašumas, turim pavyzdžių, turim jo visko, ko tik norim dabar turim. Bet čia sudėtinga iš tikro. Vyras pasikeičia lytį į moterį, tada jis nori sportuoti, kur jį dėti. Atgal su vyrais jis netiks, nes jau estrogeną vartoja, su moterim per stiprus. atskirą lygą daryti gautųsi segregacija, kurios ir taip bijo trans. Matai, atskirą lygą daryti dar yra problema, kad turbūt būtų, untenable lyga, nes, kas ten, ar bus pakankamai tų atletų, ar, dėmesio, kad iš vis, tai galėtų funkcionuoti. Tai, kažin, ar trečia lyga, tipo, yra net variantas. Nes yra ten parolimpinės, yra, kaip, čia argumentą tą, kur sako, galima padaryti galbūt atskirą, bet kiek bus dėmesio ir, ar tai ką nors išspręžinai. Denverį žiūrėk. Šičia yra toks, kaip čia kokį pavyzdį pagalvota, ne? Įsivaizduokim, 150 metų atgal atėjo pas daktarą žmogus ir skundžias. Blet, man skauda, širdį skauda. Visi internete tokie buki, kad man skauda širdį. Čia irrelevant. Ir daktaras, daug metų dirbęs, kažkur išgirdęs, sako, valgyk kiaušinius ir nebeskaudė širdies, nes, nežinau, čia gal trūksta kokio mineralo, padeda kažkodėl. Ok, tas valgo, bet čia kaip būtų, matai, tavo anekdotinis evidence. Kažkam padėjo, išgirdo, kad ten močiutės vaikui padėjo ir sako savo, aš nežinau, kas čia tau yra, bet mano močiutės ten, kokiam ten broliui, sako, padėjo kiaušinį nuo širdies skausmą, ir viskas gerai. Tas žmogus pavalgė kiaušinius, grįžo ir rimtai padėjo. Ir matai, daktaras padėjo ir buvo teisus, tai kaip tu pasakėjai, anecdotal evidence pasiremė, bet tai padėjo. Bet jis nežino, kodėl tai padėjo. Jis neturi duomenų tam ir panašiai. Ir paskui po 100 metų išėjo moksliniai tyrimai, kurie dabar jau tiksliai išsiaiškino, kad kiaušiniuose yra tam tikra medžiaga, kuri organizmui sukuria ten tokį ir tokį responsą, kas paskui padaro tą, paskui paskatina žmogų kažką pajudėti gal labiau, nes daugiau energijos turi nuo tų kiaušinių, čia aš kuriu, bet tipo. Ir tu išsiaiškini loginę seką, kodėl kiaušiniai padėjo tikrai. Ir tu dabar jau gali remtis mokslu. Vien tai, kad tu remiesi anekdotinę istoriją arba patirtimi savo, tai nereiškia, kad tu nesi teisus. Argumentas yra tas, kad tu nežinai 100% gal kodėl tai veikia, ar kodėl tai yra, ar tikslumo to trūksta. Ką mokslas ir padeda padaryti. Tai kai mes kalbame apie tos tranzišius, dažniausiai tas mūsų responsas, pirmas atsakas ir bus teisingas šitom temom. Bet mes nežinom 100% tiksliai. Jeigu paklausi ten, ar 16 metų moteris, ar 16 metų vyras tranzitioninėsi moterį turės tokį patį pranašumą kaip 25 metų vyras tranzitioninėsi moterį. Kaip tą pranašumą išmatuoti? Kokiu būdu išmatuoti? Kiek laiko tęsis pranašumas? Kokius vaistus ir kiek ilgai turėtų naudoti? Matai, čia reikia to tikslumo, ką tik mokslas realiai gali pasiūlyti. Ir gal jeigu mes turėtumėm labai daug tikslių duomenų, tada galbūt tam tikras trans moteris ir galėtumėm leisti tam tikras tam tikras sporto šakas be jokio pakenkimo moterim. Bet tam reikia tikslumo ir tam reikia, daugiau tyrimų. Čia aš apie tai, I guess. Aš pats nesužlėjęs skaitimą, bet diskusija ne apie tai. Nehui keist lytį dalbajo. Pala, kaip čia? Nehui keist lytį dalbajobui. Ne, šiaip čia aš negaliu pakomentuoti, nes man sveiko protų neišeina suvokti tokių dalykų įtūrai. Sunku tą poziciją apginti, kaip jau būtų sunku tą poziciją apginti. Tipo, nes, sakau, jų ir mokslas nepalaiko, ir visuomenė realiai nepalaiko, tai sunku tikrai apginti tą poziciją. Tai čia, jie bando, I guess. Su pačiu lyties keitimu aš neturiu jokių problemų. Jeigu tu nori, daryk ką nori. Ar man širdį skauda? Tipo, kiaušinis valgy, man neskauda širdies. Ne, tipo, žmonės gali su savim daryti ką tik nori. Jie gali nusipjauti, nusikirpti, gali gerti vaistų. Ką tik nori, gali daryti su savo. Tol, kol tu nelimituoji kitų žmonių laisvių ir teisių, tu turi savo laisvę ir teisę daryti, ką tik tais nori. Aš laikausi ir laukiuosi tos taisyklės. Tai man visiškai nesvarbu, ten tipo, kas ką daro. Bet šičia jau kalba yra, ar turėtų leisti sporte jų, ir čia jau liečia kitų žmonių teisės, tipo, ir čia jau yra diskusija, tada ir mes įklimstame tą visą ilgą, temą. Čia bet kokiu atveju bus įdomu pamatyti, kas šitoj istorijos mokslo bus true, nes jo, prieš 3 metus va taip pakalbėjom, buvo tik pradžia ir ten va pirmi atvejai buvo, kur moteris daužė ringę, dabar to jau negalima, ten yra teismai keletas tipo pradėti dėl to. Bet jo, bus įdomu, į kurią pusę eis, tikrai stebėti, man patinka žiūrėti nuo pat pradžių, kur ta diskusija rutuliosis arba nesirutulios, nes vat, kurie pasisako dabar yra iš Twitch'o, ten banami, vapšė Destiny realiai buvo užbanintas, neaišku, už ką tiksliai, bet greičiausiai už tai. Yeah.
And then
Labas, Vidai.
the empirical would be, okay, so the empirical would be the times that I just gave you for Leah Thomas, right? I can give you other examples like Mary Gregory in powerlifting, the squat. The world record female squat versus male squat is a 400-pound difference. When you're talking about men...
Ai, beje, geras pavyzdys buvo, kai aš žaidžiau pokerį senai. Technologijos dar nebuvo labai geros, tai tipo matematika, nebuvo tų solverių. Dabar yra solveriai, kur tipo optimaliai tau pasakys pagal range'us, kortų, pagal oponento range'us, tipo galimus viską procentaliai kiek reikia. Viską optimalią strategiją ir kaip pažiūrėti, ar gerą play padarė ar ne. Kai aš žaidžiau, to nebuvo realiai. Tu įdavai į formą, biškai, aišku, buvo matematikos, viską, bet jin buvo primityvi ir realiai niekas nežino 100%. Ir tada buvo labai dažnai ateidavo koks nors žmogus, aš žaidžiu tuose ir tuose limituose ir, anekdotiniam istorijom paremti buvo tokie, kaip čia, pateisinimai. Teisingas buvo play ar neteisingas, ar geras play ar ne. Ir aišku, žmonės ginčydavos, diskutuodavo, ar čia tikrai geras play ar ne, nes ten kiti žaidžia kitoj šaly ir tas play patampa blogas, nes kitoj šaly, žmonės, pavyzdžiui, daug agresyviau žaidžia. Ir žmonės turėjo tos anekdotinės istorijas ir realiai, kai kurie buvo teisūs, bet jie nežinojo, kad yra teisūs. 100%. Jie buvo įstikinę savo teismų, bet dabar, pavyzdžiui, įvedus tuos play, pavyzdžiui, tu gali įvesti. Tu žaidži iš toj šaly. Tai, kai tu vedi solverius, tu įvedi oponento range'ą, ką jisai gali tose vietose, su kuo jisai openina ten ir panašiai. Tai jeigu tu įvesi duomenis to šalies, pavyzdžiui, kad ten agresyviai žaidžias, tu su dešimkė visą laiką ten reraisina priflopę. Amerikoje ten galbūt ar kažkur kitur daug pasyviau žaidžia ir to nieko nedaro. Bet tu tuos parametrus įvedęs, tu 100% žinosi matematiškai teisingą, neginčiamą teisingą play toj vietoj ir tam nebebus jau vietos anekdotinė istorija ar kažkam. Tu arba žinai, arba nežinai. Ir tą padarė realiai, science, mokslas, kuris su laiku ištobulino tos solverius ir viską. Aišku, ten lieka ta mintis, kad tu negali 100% tiksliai tų parametrų žinoti ir kas ten to žmogus galvoja pradinių, bet, ką aš turiu meni, kad jie buvo teisūs, kai kurie, bet nežinojo, kodėl teisūs. Bet paskui, kai atsiranda mokslas ir matematika ištobulėjo toj srity, žinai, tada jie gali pažiūrėti ir nenuginčiamai žinoti matematiškai, tai yra teisinga tiesiog. Man tas įdomus yra aspektas labai. Mokslas ir žinojimas.
Men in the same weight class who are competing against each other, you're talking about infinitesimal, right, amounts of weight. You're talking about 2-3 pounds. You're talking about the world record deadlift going up, if you're lucky, by 4 pounds, maybe every 2 years, right? That's the level of competition.
Yeah.
The difference between a man and a woman is over 400 pounds. I just gave you the times, right, the empirical, as far as the swim times. You could actually look at every single swim time, track time, right? Decathlon time. You could look at every single shot put. You could look at every single long jump, high jump. You could look at the verticals. You can look at connective tissue strength, like I said, which is about 80% higher in men. So you can look at all those. That's the empirical.
Oi, palaukit sekundėlę. Man neduris skambino, bet užsibūgina kartais ten į apačią, tipo, skambina, bet man suskamba kartais, anyway, žiūriu toliau.
Sure. And I'm giving you an example of the two best female tennis players who have ever existed were both just absolutely washed in an afternoon by a drunken 200-something ranked guy.
Yeah.
Come on.
So
it's a big difference.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would say in
Let's not do the college thing. This is a big, big difference.
Yeah. In a high-level competition.
No, high-level women against low-level men. It's not even close.
Well, and to be honest, I don't know if that super matters.
The best female athletes in the world get routed by adolescent boys. Do you know that? The world the world female soccer champions, they lose almost always to high school boy teams.
So I don't know if that's super. I feel like we're kind of getting off on a separate path here as far as like.
Well, no, I'm just addressing your argument where you said, well, the difference is depending. And I said, no, it's such a huge chasm between biological males and females that's the reason they're separated. I was addressing your point.
I would still make the argument that the chasm is not as big as you make it out to be.
Okay.
But my word against your word, I don't want to look at anything. I would argue that it is not as big as, because obviously, I asked for evidence, and there is a lot of, I'm sure, specific examples.
Assuming that I'm not
Williams
lying.
Sisters. Oh, I don't think you're lying. I think all of those examples that you gave are very well, this could be true. But again,
the empirical and the anecdotal, right? You recognize that I gave you the empirical, what can be measured in a lab, what can be measured as far as times across the board. And then the anecdotal of the best female athletes competing against middling drunken men and still losing.
And
female soccer
I'm fairly
teams.
more confident that the lab, the numbers that you give are not totally accurate.
Okay.
And then as far as like the individual cases, they are individual cases, so I'm not going to,
So we'll discount the empirical and discount the anecdotal, and now it's the broad, and now it's the brutal, and nothing is safe, Isaac.
That's good. Yeah, that was a good framing you just did. But I would say that I would discount the anecdotal, yes. I will acknowledge that. But the empirical, I do believe, like, I have seen a lot of evidence that points towards my point of view.
What if you're wrong?
If I'm wrong, then I would be okay with it because I feel like I would have at least tried to protect the rights of all people to play sports.
Except
unlike
for
you. Well, I mean,
I'm trying to defend all rights of people who play sports, bet tu negini moterų tada teisų. Nes jom kenkia tai. Tai ne all. Transgini, ne all.
You were the one who said that you would not let trans men compete in sports.
You mean women? You mean biological females who are taking drugs?
Yes.
For the same reason? Yeah, you just can't take anabolic steroids in the sport.
Yeah.
Now, if you're advocating that we should allow anabolic steroids in sport, fine. How about it?
No, I'm advocating that. Like, well,
which, by the way, I'm not even necessarily against.
Yeah. Oh, you're not.
I'm not even necessarily against it. No, I think either we need to have really, really strict testing across the board, or no testing and let the game begin.
Okay. So just so
is that reasonable? It's got to be one or the other. We have shitty testing right now that people can bypass.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, honestly, I don't really have a super hard and fast opinion on that specifically.
I have very strong opinions on that.
It would probably be a lot of fun to see a bunch of roided athletes go up against each other, but
especially sports like baseball. Who cares?
I mean, I don't watch baseball.
You just want to hit them. You want to watch them hit home runs. They're not hitting anybody.
I would watch baseball if that was the case. So I think you won me over on that.
Okay. That's fine. Baseball would be less boring if we just let them roid.
Yeah, exactly. You know,
it's like the Tour de France. Did you see that? The Tour de France. They just excoriated Lance Armstrong. And I don't remember the number, because now they can retroactively go and test the samples.
Really?
Right, with modern testing methods.
Yeah.
And they tested all of the other guys who he beat, who sued him and were complaining, and they had to go down to number, I think it was 14 to find someone who was clean. And now none of the records are being set. They were all set a few years ago. So no, it makes a big difference. And by the way, you know what's interesting about that? The difference of a man on steroids. Picture the most jacked out dude, on the bodybuilding stage, does not enjoy anywhere near the exponential hormonal advantage that a male enjoys over a female. Arnold in his prime does not have a hormonal advantage over you that you do over her or her or her. It's that big of a chasm.
I could probably concede to that. I think that's probably maybe true. I don't think it sways because I guess my question to you would just be, how do you address the Leah Thomases and all of the transgender athletes who want to compete? Your opinion is strictly, just so I'm clear, biological.
Well, I'll give you two.
Okay.
So one is, and you're not going to like it, and you're going to think I'm a dick. You were competing as a man 2 years ago. You continue to compete as a man. Okay. That's the only fair way to do it. Or if I go along with the idea, which you have presented, and your peers here have presented, and your
by the way, su paladinėsiu hard dungeon. Oh my god, čia bus skausminga.
Professors have presented that gender and sex are different. Then you have to change it based on gender and create a third division. Or let me ask you this, actually, it might help. How many genders are there?
How many genders are there?
Unlimited amount.
More than 2?
I don't know.
More than 3?
Why does it matter?
Neseniai
I guess is my
nesuskaičiuot.
question.
Then you have to just create as many divisions as there are genders. So one of those 2. You compete based on biology like we always have because it's what's safe, it's what's fair, it's what protects women. Or if we want to go with sort of modern gender theory, which I don't agree with, but I would allow for it in sport where, okay, I think Facebook has you up to 50-something genders now, it may even be higher than that.
Sure.
Great, 50-something sports divisions.
Okay.
Compete in those against your gender.
It feels a bit like hyperbole to me because I don't feel like there is a cry for that for there to be 50. Like obviously,
No, of course there isn't. They want to beat up on women.
Yeah, but I'm addressing your point that you're making currently, which is that I don't think that is an issue or a problem or anybody is
Okay,
calling
create a
for that
third
to
one.
happen.
Create a third one where all the people can take all the hormones they want.
Is this your solution for the problem? Or?
It's one of 2. My solution is you go with biology because sports have been separated by biology.
Yeah.
If we need to protect trans athletes, I don't really know what that necessarily means. I don't know how they're going to be harmed by not being allowed to dominate women at a swim meet. Create a 3rd division.
I mean, I would argue trans people do get they're the target of hate crimes fairly frequently, more so than your average person.
It's not a hate crime to not let.
Ar jis galvoja, kad trans žmonėm bus geriau ir jie mažiau heito gaus, kai jie sunaikins, tipo, jiems bus leista dalyvauti moterų sporte ir jie tada rekordus ims ir visuomenė tiesiog stums ant jų dar papildomai dėl to? Ar jis galvoja, kad tai išsprendžia kažką, tai bus, tipo, geriau?
Let them compete.
Oh no, I'm not talking about not letting them compete. I'm just talking about hate crimes in general. If you want to talk about the protection of trans people.
But how are you protecting them by putting women, biological females at risk? I don't see that as a form of protection.
Well, so I think what it all kind of comes down to, and this is why I think that at the end of the day, women's sports are sort of and this is not me sort of conceit because I still do, but at the end of the day, it's very important, I think, that you affirm somebody's gender identity as they identify with it. So I think it is harmful for the trans athletes to be told, if they identify as male, that they are not.
Yeah.
And so I see that.
You just said male.
Uh-huh.
That's sex. That's not gender.
Oh, sorry. Whatever is the gender.
No, you can't keep it straight, can you?
I mean, I will listen.
Because it's silly. It's a little silly, isn't it? When we get down to a point for you to say, you said trans men before.
Yeah.
Hold on, and I want to wrap this up here, because this isn't a gotcha. This is me trying to. I don't fully understand your argument.
And then as long as I can respond after, you can.
Well, because we do have to get going. So I think you just presented your kind of closing sentiment here, but it matters because the very first thing you did when you sat down. Do you remember what it was that you said?
I do not.
I said you said you had a problem with the wording.
Yes.
And the problem that you had with the wording was that I kept saying biological males.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you said we should use the term trans women. Right?
Yeah.
But right now you just reverted back to saying they identify as males. So you yourself, the biggest problem that you had when you sat down here.
It wasn't the biggest problem. It was the first thing I said, but it wasn't the biggest.
We said that your primary issue was with the wording.
I don't think it was primary. I don't think that's what I said.
Okay, it's the first issue. It's the first grievance that you issued.
Sure. Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But right now, you just committed the same sin.
I don't think so. I mean, maybe I got my words mixed up, but I'm not going to sit here and claim that
You didn't get your words mixed up. You were being very articulate. And I think you've been articulate this whole time. I think we disagree.
Well, thank you. Yes.
But I really do think that you've been articulate, and I think you've been. You're probably the kind of. I don't know. You're probably not old enough now. Say I would grab a beer with you, and we could sit there and talk.
I'm 21, so
okay, all right. Well, sometime we could sit down and grab a beer.
I would love it.
But you just did the same thing, and that's my point with this. I just don't think there's any intellectual consistency to it whatsoever. You can't say well, the term trans.
Tai, kad nėra intellectual consistency, that is true, nes tą poziciją sunku apginti ir tas žmogus matos, kad apie tai neįmastė, argumentus atnešė pačius silpniausius, obvious, bet, Stevenas Crowder'is čia žinoma. God damn it. Plėt. Yra kaip yra.
Woman, because it's gender, it's different from sex, and then say they're allowed to compete with biological females, and then you've done this several times, you just said who identify as female or identify as male.
Yeah.
And that's my point, is it's an untenable position.
and I don't think it's about protecting trans women, to use your term now, see what I did there. I think ultimately you need to look at the consequences that harm biological women, and they deserve those same opportunities.
Yeah. My final point, I'm not going to sit here and claim that the language is not confusing or that all this stuff is not very new and like uncharted territory. I am not the most educated person in this. Just because I do not understand something fully does not mean I should dismiss the validity of it. You know, because obviously there are a group of people who, like, this is very important to them. And just because, you know,
and there's an even larger group of people too who's important, and that's biological females.
Sure. No, I'm just talking about the trans issue specifically.
Yeah.
Like.
But why not take into account biological females? That's my point. You don't seem to be concerned with them.
I'm not even addressing the sports thing. I'm addressing what you were talking about with the language issue, which is that I am, you know, still learning a lot of stuff about this. I am not the most educated person on it. The language is confusing. It's hard to integrate. But at the end of the day, the complaints that people are levying are valid, and it's something that I think people should approach with an open mind and just try their best to understand, rather than shut it down immediately. I think that's kind of where I stand on it. Just because it is something that is new to you and maybe seems nonsensical does not inherently disqualify it from being new.
It's not new to me. It's something I've studied pretty extensively,
sure.
and I do believe it's nonsensical.
Okay, yeah, and I don't.
And I would certainly say, if not the term nonsensical, it is absolutely untenable.
Okay.
It's an untenable position to say that sex is biological, gender is societal, and biological male should be allowed to compete against biological females. It's an untenable position, but I appreciate you sitting down. But Isaac,
yeah.
Isaac, thank you very much, Isaac.
Well, look at that. I don't find the arguments.
Ups. Nu jo, nu, problema ta, kad niekas kitas nešnekėjo, jaučiu su jo. Nors yra dalis antra, kur dar kur dėstytojas kažkoks ar kažkas ten atėjo, ar profesorius kažkas atėjo šnekėti, tai I guess dar ir tą reikia pažiūrėti. Kai šitą kambarį išvalysiu, pažiūrėsiu, įsijungsiu. Bet jo, kai tiek daug žmonių nenori šnekėti su Crowder'u, tiesiog su plakatais klikai ir viskas, nu tai tada tu pasiunti realiai šnekėti žmogų, kuris, nu, plečiai pirmą kartą mąsto apie tai iš viso. Su paladinu einu ant hardo dungeon, fuck my life. Okei, kur tas buvo?
Here's a pub.
Nežinau tavo pusės. Aš pradžioj dėl logo realiai jo, tu išėjai, tu buvai išėjęs šunių vedžiot, ką ten, aš pradžioj pasakiau maždaug savo poziciją dabar. Ir nemanau, kad yra labai aiškių dabar. Turbūt vienintelė koncesija, kuria, kompromisas vienintelis, kurį dabar galėtų prieiti kažkaip, vis tyrimams einant, tai trans žmonėm leisti dalyvauti tose sporto šakose, kur, visai nėra to edžo tipo. Ten galbūt ne fizinėse kokiose ten ir panašiai. Bet kitaip nežinau, kaip argumentą padaryti dabar. Spręs kažkaip tą problemą turbūt tikrai reikia, bet leisti dalyvauti tiesiog tradicinėse tose padalinimuose tikriausiai nėra sprendimas geras. Tai kažkaip kitaip reikia tą, arba ten trečią lygą ar kažką, bet kad jie galėtų netesi. Nematau argumentų. Tai dabar čia, čia, Rolling Stone journalist takes a seat, okay.
Med, NCBI, and like this is a medical journal, so I mean...
Hold on a second, let me actually, you know what? Okay, you know what, just hold it up for me. Hold it up for me. 0.0018%, almost 100 times lower than Fausto Sterling estimate of 1.7.
So it is because they're
Can you hold that up to the camera?
Welcome back to part 2 of our Change My Mind installment, specifically on the topic that biological males should not compete in women's sports. Well, at least that's what it was supposed to be. See, yesterday I sat down and spoke with Isaac, and although we disagreed, we had a productive, almost hour-long discussion. But in case you've forgotten, civility wasn't exactly on everybody's mind that day. And these are adults acting this way in college. At UNT, the Harvard of Denton County, no less. And I had to wonder, why would college students ever think it's acceptable to behave this way?
Daunai. Tiesiog daunai.
Enter one of their self-described mentors, Stephen Monticelli.
All right, so it's okay. We're comfortable with our masculinity. The more you can move in, the better.
All right, so you can actually. Oh, you got the mic on the desk.
Oh, there you go. Here, I'll have
how
it on
about
you.
that?
Your name is Stephen?
That's right, Stephen.
Monticelli is a contributing writer at Rolling Stone and the Daily Beast, where he specializes in leftist talking points and attacking college students. He's even made an appearance on CNN's New Day.
That's right.
Also, this noted Inspector Gadget impressionist who cosplays as Indiana Jones enthusiast had clearly been waiting for Change My Mind to come to UNT, the Harvard of Denton County, for quite some time, and he just couldn't hide his enthusiasm.
All right, good. Do you spell it PH or V?
The V.
Same way, very nice. Fewer letters means a cooler name. Last name?
Monticelli. I'll spell it for you.
Okay.
Monaceli.
So, German.
Italian.
Boy, missed all of that one.
Missed it by that much.
Just a little bit, but you know, both those countries have a certain history for a certain type of politics, but we're not here to talk about that today.
Yeah, no, I know. I don't know how I got that one wrong. It's almost like I wasn't even trying.
Oh, look, the sense of humor mobile. It's not stopping here.
So, Steve. Steven, Steve, how do you prefer?
Stephen.
By the way, I like this this jacket. Can I?
Thanks. Yeah, go for it.
Is it a raincoat?
Iki
Or is it
lardės.
just,
Like a
Jaučiu ant geriausios dalies
jacket.
išeisi tu čia.
Been, like, I guess, surplus.
Okay.
Military
Well, the whole
surplus.
outfit works.
Thanks.
So, Stephen, I don't know how familiar you are at all with what we do with this kind of installment is, but it's
Iki,
basically a way
kas
where we
skanaus.
can hopefully rationalize our positions on controversial topics. A lot of the times, people can have somewhat rational conversations on topics that maybe don't evoke an emotional response, and then it all goes out the window, as you've seen here on college campuses with dancing Yoda and people throwing milkshakes and screaming and all these kinds of things, which we generally like to avoid.
Now, spoiler alert, this is about to go sideways very quickly.
So today's topic is one obviously we planned for a while, but now it's in the news because of Leah Thomas. I don't believe that biological males should be allowed to compete with women, biological females in women's sports. If you disagree with me, more than happy to hear your case and let you change my mind.
So, I guess before we get into it, what is your definition of the term biological female? Is that something that would include people who are assigned female at birth that were born intersex?
So this is interesting that you're bringing up this point.
Intersex,
You're talking about
intersex.
the 0.01% of the
It's
population.
about 1.5, 1.7, because there are surgeries that are done to babies, when they're born,
Yeah.
and then they assign them a gender.
So let me address two different points here.
Sure.
First off, what I'm saying with biological males and females is the overwhelming majority of people, of course, across the globe since the beginning of time, who are born as a male, born as a female. You can go not only by chromosomes, but secondary sex
So, like,
characteristics.
if there's
Hold on, let me
are there
hold on a
100
second.
people here?
Hold on, let me finish. And then I'll address your second point.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Sure.
So doctors, for example, fill out male or female. Now we're talking about sex, right? We're not talking about identified gender. I'm assuming that you would agree
So
that
you
sex
agree
is a
there's
biological term and gender is
There's a
social.
difference between.
I understand that's
the
how
two.
gender theory is presented, certainly in gender studies on college campus.
Sure.
With intersex, it's about 0.01% of the population, and the vast majority of them,
Once again, it's
the vast majority of them don't require any kind of a sex change.
That's actually not an accurate
It
statistic.
is an accurate statistic.
I can pull up
And
the
I'll make
Google
all the
statistic
references available.
right now. It's 1.5%.
1.5% of the population is not intersex.
Well, they're born that
And
way.
even then, a very small percentage of them are improperly assigned with a primary sex at birth. They usually have
they're-
primary sexual characteristics, okay?
So
primary sexual characteristics, and very few have to end up going with some kind of a sex change operation later in life. Would we
because
agree
it's
on
often
that?
done when they're children or when they're babies.
Right, or they're assigned male, female at birth, even
So
if they're intersex.
yeah, I guess
Doctor.
that's what I'm trying to get at. Are you talking
So
about
what I'm
people
dealing
who are
with, so
assigned?
if we separate that, intersex, okay? So let's say we
Well,
allow
why should we?
intersex to no, I'm saying let's say we allow intersex to compete in the division they choose.
How do you prove that they're in? How do you even get to that question of are you or are you not? Are you asking then that there has to be a box that people have to tick that they were intersex?
I'm confused by you presenting the argument here because you asked me about intersex.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is there are edge cases here that I don't think that your presentation actually encompasses. And
I just
furthermore,
encompassed it.
so if people
what is
are
intersex?
allowed, so that someone who is born with both female and male sex characteristics.
There you go. Now you've got it.
Aš tiesiog...
So,
Yeah. And then
You just
there are
checked the box.
surgeries.
Ar jūs mat, kaip mane kampai spaudė? Negalėjau nei dodžint, nei judėt. Oh my fucking god. Change my mind. Tai, kad tu jau praleidai viską, man atrodo. Mes čia dabar visi jungiam antrą video, kuris daug trumpesnis. Visą
that are done
diskusiją jau
to them,
praleidai.
But someone would have to ask
čia
them
pochai.
that.
yes.
So are you proposing that people are asked that?
What I'm saying is if someone is intersex, let's allow that to be an exception.
Biškai
So how
Let's
do
say
we
that someone
know
who's
that that
intersex
is
can
the
compete in
case?
any division they want to.
How do we know
They would
that?
have to declare if they're intersex.
So you're at
And it would be submitted, they would obviously be examined by a doctor, just
Okay.
as the women are in women's sports and men
Okay.
are in men's sports. Just as they have to submit to not
They
only
can't
blood
move.
sampling for drug tests, hair follicle sampling, often nail scrapings, right? We both know that physicals are conducted in all sports to separate for what? Sex?
Čia
right?
nepanašu,
To
kad bus
separate for
pokalbis,
race,
normalus bus
to
screaming
separate
matches.
for-
When I was playing sports when I was a kid, no one ever inspected my genitals.
Really?
No.
You never had to turn your head and cough?
Well, that wasn't for doing sports. That's called a physical. That's a medical thing that was separate from being able to do sports.
Yeah, so you never had to do a full medical?
I mean,
So you must not have played sports at a high level.
They
Because
weren't really
everyone
concerned
has to
about-
pass a medical.
So-
You do realize that at Division I sports you would have to pass a medical. You know
so
why?
so the medical would be a description of your genitals. Would that?
It would
be-
include it.
It would include a written description and a verbal description.
Yes.
Really?
This
Really?
medical examination, yeah, would include the description of your vitals,
Okay.
of your health,
Okay.
of your health parameters.
So I guess now that we've gone through that, what is?
But we
the-
haven't gone through that.
What is the reason that you're?
We haven't gone through that. You haven't
So
answered
if you're
me.
concerned, if you're less concerned about intersex people, then why are you so concerned about transgender people?
Again, I was answering your question. You asked about
Well,
intersex.
they both get surgeries. Sometimes they both need hormone treatment. What's your position against? If you're okay with one, why are you not okay
so
with the
there's
other?
well, here's exactly why. First off, you're taking an extreme example to make a point, misrepresenting those statistics. It's not 1.5% of the population.
All right,
You
I'll
won't
just
find a
Google
physician
it.
in the country.
It's fine.
You won't find a single physician in the country.
According to experts, 1.7% of the population is born with intersex traits.
Pause a second. Let's analyze his Googling technique.
I'll just
Find a
Google
physician
it.
in the country.
It's fine.
You
Oh
won't
god.
find a single physician in the country.
According to experts,
Huh, a two-click Google search. It's almost as if he had the whole thing planned out. Poorly.
Oh god.
1.7% of the population is born with intersex traits.
That's
It's
from
just,
amnesty.org.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I can just like keep. I can go
It's
to.
from amnesty.org.
I mean, it's from there's Wikipedia. There's
yes,
plenty of.
Amnesty and Wikipedia. Okay.
There's
I'll make my
here's a
references
PubMed,
available.
NCBI, and like this is a medical journal. So I mean, like,
You know,
look,
hold on a
man,
second. Let me actually.
I'm not gonna
Hold on a
let
second.
you
Let you know
touch
what?
my
'Cause
phone.
okay, you know what? Just
I
hold
would
it up for me.
encourage
Hold it up for me.
anyone that
Hold it up for me.
wants to do
Because you
this.
just brought up PubMed and it didn't
Yeah.
reflect what you just reflected in
So
Amnesty.
abstract.
0.0018%, almost 100 times lower than Fausto Sterling estimate of 1.7.
So it is because they are.
Like, can you
talking
hold that
about
up to the camera?
chromosomal Sex.
Can you hold that up to the camera?
Inconsistent.
Can you hold that up to the
phenotypic
camera?
Sex. Yeah. So let's see. There's.
Can you hold it up to the camera?
There's a debate about this, which is what we're having.
Pause. Now, if you notice the shift, and I mean increase in my enthusiasm, it's because I was intensely familiar with the PubMed paper he was attempting to cite. And by cite, I mean blatantly misrepresent. And by blatantly misrepresent, I mean lie about. And this is the real value of Change My Mind in the conversations being included in their full context unedited. It's one thing to be able to lie about numbers to unsuspecting students in order to score political points. It's another to face accountability
Unedited,
in real time. So
O
let's
kas
rewind
čia neditas?
and zoom in and enhance on his screen. Unfortunately, the tech isn't good enough to get a crystal clear picture, but here's the actual PubMed article abstract. If the term intersex is to retain any meaning, the term should be restricted to those conditions in which chromosomal sex is inconsistent with phenotypic sex, or in which the phenotype is not classifiable as either male or female. Applying this more precise definition, the true prevalence of intersex is seen to be about 0.018%, almost 100 times lower than the Fausto Sterling estimate of 1.7.
Can you hold it up to the camera?
There's a debate about this, which is what we're having. Yeah, you can.
No wonder the social justice warrior / handler of Curious George shoved his phone back in his pocket faster than a crack pipe at the bordello of Biden.
Yeah, you can Google.
But you didn't
can
present
get
it as a
different-
debate.
You can get different.
Hold on a second. Let me finish here because you just brought up Amnesty.org and Wikipedia.
Sure.
The only legitimate medical publication that you brought up said exactly what I said. What number did I give you? What number did I give you?
So then let's put it into
What number
numbers.
did I give
If
you?
there are 100 people here
What
or
number did I
1,000
give you?
people here, if there are 100 people here or there are 1,000 people here, there's still going to be at least one person.
Look, if you're
There's
not
still
going
gonna be at least
if
one
truth
person.
doesn't matter to you, this isn't going to be a productive
I'm
conversation.
actually giving the numbers.
What number did I give to you?
So you gave me 0.1%?
0.01%.
0.01%.
What does that number from PubMed say?
Let's see. It says 0.08, which would be
0.018%.
0.018%?
Yeah, that's the number I gave you.
So let's see what PubMed just said.
That is PubMed. You just showed the PubMed.
Yeah, I'm just going to pull
Now
up
you're
the
going
same
back to
doc.
Amnesty.org, or you're going to Wikipedia. So my point is, look, you sit here and you spout numbers that are inaccurate. When you go to one legitimate medical journal, it says that it's actually 1,000 times lower. So do we want to have a conversation about the topic at hand, or do you want to keep embarrassing yourself with wrong
All right,
numbers?
so if you're going to accept that there are people in this world, no matter how rare that you think that they are, that you're going to allow to participate in
No,
sports.
no matter how rare your own sources said they are.
No matter how rare that there are in existence, it doesn't matter what you think or what I think they exist.
The numbers are the numbers. Go
Do
ahead.
you believe that they exist?
Of course, I believe that
So-
0.018% according
So
to
there are
PubMed.
people. So there are people in this state, in this city,
Yes.
who would fit that categorization. And just because there are a small number of them, you're going to just kind of
And
disregard
what
the
number
example.
of them require some kind of sex change? What number of them require
Why is that so
hormonal
threatening to you?
It's not threatening to me.
It seems like it is.
Well, what's bothering to
Deflecting
me
on the
is your dishonesty.
So I'll
this is a red
grant your
herring.
number. I'll grant your number, and my
Right.
argument is still the same.
So what's the number of people there who are not accurately defined at birth by their primary and secondary sexual characteristics?
So once again,
It's about
why is this?
0.2% of 0.018% of the population.
Iš viso, nu, negalima taip lyginti, aišku, nu, tipo, bet ar tas argumentas nesubirėtų, net jeigu naudotum kitoje vietoje? Žiūrėk, gimė vaikas su 3 rankom. Ir dabar, tipo, nu, ble, čia, jo, durnas turbūt argumentas irgi bus, negalėtų naudoti. Bet, tipo, tokį, tai dabar reikia sukurti atskirą lygą, kad galėtų vaikai sportuoti su 3 rankom gimę. Nu, tipo, nes čia, nu, jie būdų čia tą argumentą bando pristatyti, nesvarbu koks skaičius yra, bet, nu, sako, kad neįtikėtinai mažas skaičius. Ir dėl to mažo skaičių dabar reikia naikinti po visų moterų sportą maždaug. Arba čia sako, kad kaip tik nebus didelio skirtumo, nes per mažai yra, aš nežinau. Argumentas atrodo, kaip būtų bukas gilintis apie skaičius šitos. Nu, tipo, kiek ten būtent jų yra. I don't know. Aš nežinau, čia matos, kad in bad Faith čia atėjo padiskutuotas Rolling Stone žurnalistas, tipo, matos, kai jis, nu, labai agresyviai nusteikęs. Žinot, kas bėsina? Kad šičia ateina kalbėti su Crowderiu tokie daunai, blet, kad Crowderis atrodo protingas ir normalus žmogus. Tame yra liūdna. Nes, blet, už kiek daug dalykų galima Crowderį kritikuoti, kai jis sako, ką daro. Bet kai ateina tokie, jis atrodo protingas, tipo, nes jis teisesnis už juos, tikrai. Nes ką jie čia ateina pasakoja, tai tiesiog apgailėtina. Prisimenu tą čiuvaką, kur apie socializmą su Crowderiu kalbėjo Jusefas? Kur vienas žmogus tiesiog suvarė Crowderį. Nu, ten... Net komentarų sekcijoje žmonės rašė Crowderio žovai, kad Jusefas tiesiog he won. Įdomu, jis darė kažką toliau, tas čiuvakas. Ten buvo labai akivaizdžiai. Crowderis buvo labai uncomfortable ir jis buvo tiesiog sunešiotas fucking live. Uff.
So because
Now, that's
and what's
not-
the
so the point
percentage
is
of
that's a
people that are
very
competing
small-
in sports that are transgender? What's that number of the population? What's that
The
percentage?
number of transgender people. in a
Percentage of the
population
total
about
population,
1%.
yeah, and that are
now,
competing in sports.
As far as the categories that they enter, they end up winning about 66%, for example, in track, upwards of 90% in strength sports like powerlifting and Olympic lifting. That's significant. So even though they make up 1% of the population when they enter into female sports, they overwhelmingly tend to dominate, and this is a very small sample size. So my question to you is, what do we do? Because you're supposed to sit here and
Are we going to start talking about genetics as it relates to people winning sports? Is that what you want to do? Is that what you're at?
Male
Is that
and
what
female
you're
sports
asking?
are separated by biology, yes?
I mean, what's the point of sports?
To win.
It don't matter if you win by an inch or a mile. Winning's winning.
Why is that funny?
It just tells me a lot about who you are.
The point
Tai sport, what? Ar jis tiesiog keičia temas ir, jo, šičia yra tiesiog tūpas žmogus, keičia temas, nenori diskutuoti, nenori kalbėti, nenori engaginti su nieko. Ką blogai pasakė, tiesiog tada, tipo, sportas yra varžybos ir pagrindinis tikslas yra laimėti, taip, what? Tu, tipo, tu gali sportuoti, kad sveikatą palaikinti, tas sportininkų, bet kai tu eini varžybas, varžyti, šiaip apie tai kalba, pas juos tas terminas, tipo. Tu gali sportuoti, aš sportuoju, ten bėgioju, dėl savo sveikatos, sure. Jo, participation trophy laimėti. Bet kai tu eini varžybas varžytis, tu varžais, tu save ir pušini rezultatus rodyti ir varžai su kitais ir laimėti nori. Žinoma, what?
to sports is not to win?
I think a lot of people think there's more than one point to sports. I mean...
By the way, nežinau ar pastebėjot, aš pirmą kartą pastebėjau, aš čia biškai FK buvau, man reikėjo paimti 5 medžius ar kiek čia, tipo, kažką iš tų medžių. Ir aš pabuvau tam tikrą laiką FK ir ant mapo įjungė raudonus taškus, kur tie medžiai yra. Tai reiškia, kažkas sukodino pagalbą žmonėm, kurie, neranda gal ar panašiai, kad neužstriktų šitoj vietoj. Holy fuck. Extensive čia yra noob-friendly žaidimas, tipo, kur, tipo, kad tu, kaip čia, kad, tipo, okei, tu stragrini galbūt nerandi, galbūt ten paslėpti, tipo, whatever. Tai objektyvą questo parodė tiesiog ant mapo įjungę, nors dabar jau padariau, neberodo. O aš kadangi šnekėjau, čia, tipo, FK buvau, žaidimas galvoju, kad aš nerandu. Fascinating. Geras. Čia turbūt tai yra mechanika žaidimo, jinai turbūt pritaikoma bus visose vietose. Gal šitoje vietoje medžiai labai aiškiai matos, gal kitose koks vienas bus kur nors užslėptas ir žmogus ten 5 minutės neras jo, bet reiškia mechanikai įsijungia automatiškai po kažkiek laiko tipo rodo.
I think so much of sports is like people getting sweaty and like rubbing around with each other.
What's the point to winning an Olympic medal?
I don't know. I mean, why do we have the Olympics?
To identify who the best is at sport.
What is the historical reason why we have the Olympics?
Do you mean you want to go back to pancration?
I mean, do we want to talk about, like the modern reinvention of it?
Okay, so...
Fascist politics, all that kind of stuff.
So you believe that people are competing, for example, in swimming, decathlon, biathlon, because of fascist politics?
I think that the overarching mindset that sports is about, declaring dominance and that there's some sort of actual value in like this idea of international representation of dominance in sports. Did you ever have fun in your life? Like,
oh my god, nekeisk temos degradė, blėt.
No, but I'm saying is like, you said it's all about winning, so...
I said, what is the point of sports? What is the point of sports?
I think sports is a lot about having fun and, making relationships with people and camaraderie.
Oh god.
The Olympic medaling platform? Think that's fun?
Go on, think. Is it fun?
No, it is fun.
Absolutely not.
Competing yra fun, bet kartu ir labai daug streso ir
provide a sense of accomplishment.
Why?
A sense of joy, because they worked hard to get there.
And the joy and accomplishment comes from what?
Working hard to get there, I guess.
Wouldn't you going to great lengths to avoid the term winning a medal?
I mean, hey, if you get second place and you're a spoiled brat about it, I think a lot of people would think you're kind of lame.
Do you think that the Olympic silver medalist who took second place to Leah Thomas, who wouldn't be ranked top 500 in the male division, is being a spoiled brat?
Well, what is your solution? Would you want to create an entirely separate category for transgender people in sports?
If you want to, we can. Otherwise,
no, that's not what I want to. I'm asking what you want.
Yeah, I think biological males should compete with biological males.
I'm asking specifically about transgender and intersex people now. Where do you think they should compete in sports?
Well, let's separate transgender and intersex because intersex people don't want to be lumped in with transgenders.
I mean, who are you to speak for them? Are you
I'm not
intersex?
letting them
Are you
speak for
telling me
them.
something about yourself?
I'm letting them speak for them, but I'm sure you'll find statistics that will prove you wrong and bolster what I'm discussing right now. Intersex
sure.
people don't want to be lumped in with transgender individuals because there is a biological issue. There's not a biological issue with transgender individuals. It is a societal issue. It's a
Is
social
it a
issue.
biological issue that you would never make a basketball team because you can't jump?
That I can't jump?
Yeah.
Why are you making that presumption?
I'm just kind of following this logic to where
Are
it
you
might
racist?
conclude. No, I'm asking, are you?
You're asking, am I racist?
Yeah, what I'm saying is if you're so obsessed with certain types of people winning certain types of categories as if there's some sort of
Males and
biological...
females? Yeah.
So
You
you're an
mean you believe it's a figment of
essentialist.
my
Prasme,
imagination?
You're an
jis
essentialist.
išprotėjęs?
Oh, well, let's throw that to Maroon. What do you mean that I'm an essentialist, that I believe biological males should compete against biological males?
Well, I mean, you just talk about biological males and females so much that it essentializes gender into a binary that doesn't include all these people that we've just been talking about, and sex into a binary.
Do you
that
see,
we all-
well, and sex.
Yeah.
You said gender.
And sex, yeah.
I didn't mention gender, I mentioned sex.
Well, I'm talking about both. Yeah, I
But
would
I'm
say.
not.
Well, then let's just focus on sex. You are creating an essentialist
Biological
binary.
males compete.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so if you are saying that it is not binary, sex, then you are suggesting there should be a third division.
Not necessarily.
What's your solution?
I'm saying we should maybe stop taking sports so damn seriously and.
Ai, taigi tas garsiausias argumentas. It's just a game, bro. You don't have to be mad, blet. Va, priėjom prie jo pasaulėžiūros. Taigi visiems man nerūpi competitionas ir sportas, tai ką čia kitiem rūpi? It's just a game, bro, ką čia sportuojat, ką čia kamuolį mėtot į krepšinį. Taigi chillautinkit, seniai. Va šičia yra žurnalistas, kabutėse parašė. Oh my god. Man kokie žmonės gina poziciją. Tada, aš sakau, studentas turbūt daugiau pasidomėjęs galėtų geriau pasirodyti negu šitas žmogus, bet studentai buvo užsiėmę rėkti ir sakyti, kad čia netėjo pašnekėti. Nu, tada jūs pozicija gina va tokie degradai. Ar jeigu jūs nematot, kad čia yra degradas, nu, tai tada jau, dieve mano, tupumas ir jūsų didesnis. Bet dieve, kiek galima... Bent jau diskusiją galėtų turėti, bent jau pokalbį galėtų turėti, bent jau kažkaip mėginti velnio advokatą žaisk, bent jau jeigu nepritari. Ta prasme, aš tikiu, kad Stevenas Crowderis šitoje vietoje geresnis būtų, geriau sugebėtų apginti transpoziciją šitam debate, negu kad tie žmonės, kurie atėjo. Nu, turbūt taip ir reikia, nes jo jisai pasiruošęs tiem atsakymam iš karto tiem argumentam. Nes jeigu nori laimėti tokį debatą, tu turi priešų poziciją žinoti ir maždaug būti pasiruošęs tai pozicijai. Nes tie, kur dabar atėjo kalbėti, būtent čiuvakai, jie visai nepasiruošę iš nei vienos pusės. What the fuck?
People compete and create structures for competing that aren't so damn politicized. How about that?
It's not politicized.
How about no?
Okay, great. So women should just shut up and take it. They're taking it too seriously. Women are taking it too
I don't think
seriously.
that's what I think you're taking it too seriously.
No, I'm saying women out there are taking it too seriously.
Talk to a woman. There's plenty of women here. Talk to a woman.
Yeah, I have. I've spoken with many
What
women.
did she say?
But there's also
What
the
did they
empirical
say?
data. They of course don't want biological males to compete in women's sports.
All right, so I'm going to give
Yeah,
up my
that's a
seat
female
now.
athlete.
Is there a woman who would like to speak to him?
Pause.
No.
It's funny he should ask because we just so happen to have talked to a female athlete, one of Leah Thomas's teammates, peers, if you will, at UPenn to be exact. And here's what she had to say. That guy, Monticelli, seems to be uneducated. I would say that the way the rules are set up right now straight up deny women from equal educational opportunities in sport and discriminate against women by not recognizing the physical differences between men and women. And women shouldn't be forced to take a back seat in their own sport.
Any women?
Female athlete.
All right, cool. Hey, it's been nice, Steve.
Thank you very
Take
much.
care.
I appreciate
What
it.
the fucking pussy.
I don't know.
So no solution, no dog in the fight, just wrong sources. This conversation's been very productive.
I'd say
Žiauru.
have fun making it your career to go talk to college students who don't want to talk to you.
Don't be an
Tai tik ką su tavim kalbėjo?
asshole your whole life.
Now, given what's transpired, one might think that Mr. Monticelli would take the L and never speak of this embarrassing performance again. But that's not what insane people do. Instead, he took to Twitter to declare victory and attempt to dox our car.
Yep. Kaip leftistas. Ir kaip galima žiūrėti ir paskui galvoti, kad ne, su left viskas gerai. Ta prasme, tu gali sakyti, republikonai yra visiškai psichopatai ir jie yra, fucking jie yra psichai. Bet tada pažiūrė į leftistus, what the fuck is this? Ta prasme, aš nežinau, abiejose pusėse, kuo toliau į ekstremą eini, tiesiog atrodo visos smegenų ląstelės išnyksta. Nu, nafig. Kur man dabar reikia eiti, by the way? Pala, kaip man ten nusigauti? Basement, į tą portalą, taip.
Looks like someone might be getting a little obsessed.
Why are you so obsessed with me?
This is the kind of delusional behavior which can only be exhibited by people who've evaded accountability or being beholden to any form of...
Aš manau taip. Manau, centras nelabai ir gali egzistuoti, nes nėra labai įmanoma, bet aš stengiuosi kuo arčiau centro būt, bet aš tikrai lyninu į liberalią pusę, nes kitaip, nežinau, neįmanoma, mano vertybės tokios, bet aš labai stengiuosi nei vieną, nei pusę iki ekstremų nedaiti tikrai, nes ten tiesiog, aš nežinau, sveikas protas turi laimėti, tiesiog bet kokią temą turi galėti paimti, šnekėti ją, mąstyti ją, o ne va, čia man reikia taip mąstyti, nes aš nežinau, absurdas man, bet jau abi pusės atrodo išprotėjusios, aš tikiuosi, aš niekada nebūsiu labai vienoje ir kitoje pusėje. Nu, aš čia kaip kieno paklausiu, va tas yra, tos pusės, žinai, koks leftistas Lietuvoje skaitytųsi turbūt visiškas radikalas right-wingeris Amerikoje. Tai čia labai irgi turbūt priklauso, anyway.
Truth throughout their entire lives. That's long form for professional journalist.
So, I mean, he pulled out some statistics.
But what kind of behavior would you expect from someone who was fired for reporting fake news and is currently facing a defamation lawsuit? Now, granted, Mr. Montesemeli is innocent until proven guilty, but he's also been accused of, and admitted to, making inappropriate sexual remarks to random women.
Shit. That's true.
But hey, we all make repeatedly the same mistakes, right?
We all do.
I don't know, am I just being too harsh? Comment below and let Mr. Monticelli know what you think of his time in the spotlight. Now, luckily for the country, not everyone is like Mr. Monticelli over here. And in the final installment of our 3-part series on this topic, we'll be able to get back to the basics of Change My Mind with some folks who were happy to take part, sit down, have conversations, and honestly made me glad to have done it. So come back Monday, April 11th, to check that out if you aren't already tuning into The Daily Show at 10 a.m. Eastern.
I guess gerai, galbūt bus dar viena dalis, ką galėsim rytoj, pažiūrėti, ar ten, aš nežinau, kad išeis ten, bet jo, šičia buvo, tismas biškiukai buvo, net gana lai, aš pažiūrėsiu, ar neišėjo dar, biggest cell phone, neišėjo. Nu jo, šitokie žmonės niekad jokios pozicijos, 11 plėt, tai vėliau. Šitokie žmonės niekad jokios pozicijos niekam neįrodys ir neapgins savo, nes, išprotėję tiesiog. Tikėkime, gal atės žmonių, kurie bent biškai geriau savo tą poziciją gins. Damn.